Chapter 2585. Mo Tianji's palms closed and his eyes closed. His face suddenly flushed red and he immediately spat out 3 mouthfuls of blood. His whole body trembled. His entire person seemed to have aged by 3 to 5 years in an instant. Extremely tired, he gasped for breath and immediately grabbed Chu Yang. Move out immediately. Use the fastest speed to go to Big Western Paradise. Things are not good. Saying this, he dragged Chu Yang and was about to set off. Blood was still flowing out of the corners of his mouth, but he didn't care about it at all. He only had the thought of rushing at full speed. Chu Yang made a prompt decision and didn't ask why. He raised his arms and said, "Everyone, set off immediately. The situation is urgent. Use all your strength to go to Big Western Paradise." Before his voice fell, he was already carrying Mo Tianji as he took the lead and rushed out several hundred feet. Ji Mo, Luo Ku Di, Rui Biu Tong, Mo Ching Wu, and the others were still recuperating a moment ago. Now, they were all anxiously rushing to keep up. No one asked what had happened, but they all coincidentally burned their own life potential and turned it into advancing speed. What's the situation? Is there a big danger on Du Xing's side? While running, Chu Yang transmitted a question to Mo Tianji on his back. Mo Tianji breathed heavily. Right now, it's not just Du Xing. Big Western Paradise has an ominous star shining, including Jiyu Du Xing, Dong Wushong, and Xiedan Qiong. They are all in danger of dying. We have to hurry over as soon as possible to have a chance of survival. Cough cough cough. Lei is not with us. I can't divine it, but she's with Dong Wushong. I'm afraid. Mo Tianji coughed violently and immediately spat out a mouthful of blood. Chu Yang's whole body shook. He only felt all the hair on his body stand up. His speed, which had already been raised to the limit, unexpectedly increased by a bit. This speed is still not enough. We can't make it in time. Mo Tianji swallowed a mouthful of blood with difficulty. His gaze was anxious and his heart was burning with impatience. Just now, when Mo Tianji forcibly saw through heaven's secrets, he received the most serious backlash in his life, but he didn't care about it at all. Right now, there was nothing more important than saving the lives of his 3 brothers. According to the divination, if we were to rush over at this speed, the 3 brothers would have already been reduced to dust by the time we arrived. In fact, we will all die in this battle. Mo Tianji tried his best to control himself. Boss, the only way, is to put us all into the tribulation space, and then you, cough cough cough, use the tribulation saw. Only by running as fast as you can we get there. Only by gathering with tribulation. Only then will we have a chance to survive. Quick. Mo Tianji said the last word. He once again spurted out a mouthful of blood. Then, he fainted on Chu Yang's back, and fell into a deep coma. Seeing this, Chu Yang was shocked and immediately called Chu Le over. He handed Mo Tianji over to her. Then, he gathered everyone and said, "Everyone, don't move. I'll use another method to bring you along." Putting people into the tribulation space could only be done when they were absolutely still. Just as everyone stood still, Chu Yang spun around and swept everyone into the tribulation space. Meanwhile, with a clear sword hum, the calamity sword appeared in the void and appeared in Chu Yang's hand. Sword light flashed. Only then did the long sword appear in Chu Yang's hand. Almost at the same time, Chu Yang had already activated the heaven-splitting divine technique. He focused all his attention on the calamity sword. Then, he used 3 moves in succession. These 3 moves were all the same, so what if I slaughter the world? In order to hasten his journey, Chu Yang actually used the number 1 killing sword in the world to propel himself forward. Moreover, he used it 3 times in succession. At the same time, suddenly, wind and thunder surged in the sky. The sword light only stopped for a moment. Then, with a whoosh, it drew a long line of light in midair. In an instant, it had already traveled hundreds of miles. As the ray of light streaked across the sky, the trajectory of the ray of light shattered into a long black hole. After the black hole appeared, an extremely dull sonic boom suddenly sounded. However, by this time, Chu Yang had already disappeared without a trace. Even the light of the sword had disappeared. Because at this moment, Chu Yang used "so what if I slaughter the world again" several times. He forcefully activated the sword move and rushed forward. At this moment, Chu Yang was completely crazy. He didn't care about anything. He rushed forward regardless of the cost. Chu Yang continuously activated his elemental energy and accelerated. His dantian and nebula were agitated at the same time, one move after another. "So what if I slaughter the world" was executed continuously. The sharpest in the world. The best killing move in the world. However, at the same time, it was the fastest sword in the world. This move, in essence, had reached the extreme realm of speed that could be achieved by becoming one with the sword. Now, Chu Yang's speed had increased by at least 10 times compared to his previous speed. His previous speed was already Chu Yang's limit. Now, it had increased by another 10 times. This speed was beyond the limit that even Die who had never achieved. Godly speed. Chu Yang's body maintained a parallel position in the air. His head was in front and his feet were behind. The tip of the long sword in his right hand was pointing straight ahead. The tip of the sword flashed with wind and thunder. It forcefully broke open the space in front and opened up an unobstructed path to heaven. Chu Yang's body went straight forward like this. In just an hour's time, 5,000 miles of distance had already disappeared under the sword. Chu Yang forcefully activated the sword move and rushed forward without any scruples. Everyone who saw this scene was inexplicably shocked. They really didn't know what was happening in the sky. In fact, most people only saw a dazzling ray of light flying past quickly. When they wanted to take a closer look, this ray of light had already disappeared from their sight. The only thing that could be seen and heard was a series of explosions coming from the horizon. From the horizon came a dull sound, as if the ancient thunder god was beating the war drum. It was just another black hole that flashed by. What's going on? What's happening? Is the world going to collapse? It's too scary. This was the reaction of ordinary people. As for the eyes of experts, this ray of sword light indicated that an earth-shattering battle was about to begin. When everyone saw this ray of sword light, they felt the hair on their backs stand up. Goosebumps rose all over their bodies. A chill ran down their spines from the bottom of their hearts. A peerless expert. At least at the level of Die who. Even Die who may not be able to achieve such godly speed, right? To rush forward like this, it must be an extremely urgent matter. Once it arrives, it's bound to be an earth-shattering decisive battle. But, who is this person? Who is this person? When did such a world-shocking character appear in the Heaven Imperial Court? The most intense thing is that murderous aura. He's clearly far above the sky, but I can clearly feel the murderous aura rushing straight to my eyebrows. I'm scared witless. That's right. This person is clearly an out-and-out killing god. Looking at his imposing manner, I'm afraid, even if he massacred this Heaven Imperial Court's trillions of people, he wouldn't have the least bit of change in expression. Who is this person? Who is his opponent? Let's go take a look. Don't, spare me. This kind of expert, just glare at me and my soul will scatter. I'm not going to join in the fun. When I get home, I'll burn incense and kowtow, and let my ancestors bless me. Such a terrifying person, let me never meet him again in my lifetime. Yeah, such power, such a baleful aura. In the entire Heaven Imperial Court, those who can match this sword. I'm afraid the number of fingers can be counted. The one who said this was a peak-level saint expert from the big western sky. This person had just walked out from his seclusion, and was about to enter the world of mortals, thinking of dispersing his own loneliness and solitude. But, as soon as he came out, he saw this terrifying nightmarish sword light. Immediately, it was as if he was struck by lightning. His whole body trembled, and he became sluggish. With my cultivation, under this person's sword, I'm afraid I can't even last half a move. This peak-level saint expert trembled from head to toe, his face full of fear. I originally thought that since I've already reached the peak of saint level, even if it's enough to proclaim myself as the overlord of this world, it's still okay to dominate a region. But now it seems, the Heaven Imperial Court has become very frightening. I'd better return to the mountain and live in seclusion. At least that place is very safe. This previously ambitious, secluded expert let out a long sigh. Extremely lonely, he walked back the way he came. Henceforth, for the rest of his life, he didn't step into Jianghu again. The terror of this sword became his nightmare for the latter half of his life. In short, Chu Yang flew all the way for thousands of miles, and in the true sense, it completely boiled over. How many experts had their confidence completely shattered by this world-shaking peerless sword strike? This was a sword that shouldn't have appeared in the Heaven Imperial Court in the mortal world. Chu Yang's gaze was persistent. There was nothing else. The nebula in his dantian surged at the same time. It seemed that the nebula in his dantian was also arranging troops and setting up a battle array, intensely preparing for the imminent decisive battle. Thousands of miles of mountains and rivers, a sword flying across. At this moment, Chu Yang had already entered the territory of the big western sky. But Chu Yang didn't pause at all. He allowed the calamity sword to automatically search for Jiyu Duxing, Dongwu Shong, and Xiedanqiong's aura. It led Chu Yang, whistling through the wind and thunder. At this moment, Chu Yang actually followed the sword as it moved, as if he was a sword servant. Dongwu Shong, Xiedanqiong, and the others had already sunk into an extreme state of ecstasy. Because, after continuously moving in a spiral motion and searching for 5,000 miles, the Black Dragon Sword's sword spirit finally reacted. The little black dragon sneakily emerged from the Black Dragon Sword. It shook its head and wagged its tail, gesticulating with its hands and feet. It was so excited that it couldn't be any more excited. Found it. Dongwu Shong's face was pleasantly surprised, almost jumping for joy. Chapter 2586. You didn't find it? Then why are you so excited? Dongwu Shong didn't understand. Mo Leia rolled her eyes at him and asked the little black dragon gently, "Did you feel it? Although it's not very strong, you did feel it." The little black dragon was excited and nodded repeatedly in agreement. Then which direction is it exactly? Mo Leia was also excited. Traveling 5,000 miles in a spiral motion wasn't just a simple 5,000 miles journey, it was a journey that required a considerable amount of effort. The little black dragon stretched out its claws and seemed to hesitate for a while. Finally, it pointed to the east and then to the south. It should be in the range of this and that. Mo Leia guessed. The little black dragon shook its head and wagged its tail. Then, it should be in these two directions. Mo Leia continued to guess. The little black dragon nodded happily and did a somersault back into the Black Dragon Sword. Dongwu Shang was very unhappy with the dragon's attitude. This little perverted dragon is even worse than Ao Xieyun. It's clearly valuing sex over friendship. When I asked it if it found it just now, it shook its head. When you asked it, it nodded. It's simply taking liberties with my wife. This little perverted dragon, when I find Jiyu Duxing, I'll definitely pull it out of the Black Dragon Sword and teach it a lesson. Mo Leia rolled her eyes. Can you not be so embarrassing? It's clearly you who are stupid and blaming others for not giving you a clear hint. What you asked just now was if it was found. If he didn't find it, of course he would shake his head. He's only confirmed two possible directions now. It's not like he found it. It's clearly you who didn't ask the right question. You're actually blaming the little dragon for being perverted. You're actually blaming him for flirting with your wife. Is your wife so easy to flirt with? Mo Leia rolled her eyes and hugged the Black Dragon Sword angrily as she walked away, ignoring a certain someone. Dong Wushang scratched his head and followed behind. Ignoring Xiedanqiong and the others who were secretly laughing, he muttered, "Anyway, I just feel unhappy. You're my wife. Why should he be so close to you?" Xiedanqiong had been silent all this time. But now that he had ascertained Jiyu Duxing's location, his mood had become very good. He unexpectedly cracked a joke and said, "You are jealous. You are purely jealous. Moreover, he's jealous of a sword spirit. This is simply a super weirdo since ancient times. Ha 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 ha." Before he could finish, he laughed heartily. Along the way, Xiedanqiong had been worried about Jiyu Duxing's safety all along. But, to be honest, he was still having a good time. Dong Wushang looked at him with a black face. Xiedanqiong, good, good, good. You must remember. Among the brothers, you have to call me big brother. Xiedanqiong restrained his smile and said solemnly, let's go quickly. Second brother Jiyu might be in front of us. We can't afford to delay him. Then, he took the lead and flew away. Dong Wushang, who was just about to pick up fourth brother's fight, suddenly lost his target. He scratched his head and followed after them, thinking to himself, when I'm free. He should discuss this with boss and study it further. Could he come up with a heavy pill that could make people smarter, so that they wouldn't be defeated like they were now? And in the sky above them, a white cloud slowly floated over. The white cloud silently transformed into a human face. It looked sideways at the people below who were in high spirits and revealed a cruel sneer. Then, it turned back into a white cloud. Then, it quietly followed. Looks like they're about to find Jiyu Duxing. I didn't wait in vain. Only Saint Monarch frowned and thought to himself, the efficiency of these guys is really not slow. I originally thought that you guys would need at least 4 or 5 days to find him. I didn't expect that you guys would find him in just 2 days. But, the faster you guys find him, the faster you'll die. Looks like the time to make a move is coming soon. Only Saint Monarch muttered to himself. A white cloud suddenly floated over and turned into a mask. Then, another white cloud floated over and turned into a mask. A cruel and sinister smile appeared on his face. Even his figure had undergone a subtle change. I'll make a move when you guys are the happiest and the most excited. At that time, you guys will show an expression of extreme joy turning into sorrow. It will certainly be very exciting. This can be considered as a small reward for your efforts. Mo Lei, Dong Wushang, and the others followed the direction that the little black dragon had determined. After walking for no less than a few hundred miles, they suddenly discovered that the destination that the little black dragon had mentioned was actually a boundless freshwater lake filled with green ripples. The lake was vast and seemed to extend to the ends of the sky. Faced with this scene, everyone was stunned. Only the black dragon sword spirit seemed to be even more excited. It was very obvious that it was pointing in a certain direction. Over there. Mo Lei's gaze focused and she asked with some hesitation. The little black dragon nodded excitedly. It shook its head and wagged its tail, nodding and bowing. Before it finished speaking, Dong Wushang and Xiedanqiong had already flown up impatiently. They were high in the air and flew towards the opposite direction. Second brother Jiyu. Second brother Jiyu. I'm Xiedanqiong. Wushang and I are here. Second brother Jiyu. Ha ha ha. How are you now? Dong Wushang's voice was the loudest. At this moment, the joy of finding his brother had long overshadowed everything else. It was a strong feeling of regaining something that had been lost. It was incomparably real. He firmly believed that somewhere on the opposite side, Jiyu Duxing was there. The feeling of the black dragon sword spirit definitely couldn't be wrong. It was closely connected to Jiyu Duxing's soul. How could it be wrong in such matters? Xiedanqiong, who had always been calm and elegant, also had the urge to dance with joy at this moment. He even had the feeling of wanting to cry. Thank the heavens, second brother is fine. In mid-air, that white cloud drifted over slowly and followed Dong Wushang and Xiedanqiong to the opposite shore. Vaguely, a figure was already gradually taking shape above the clouds, but Dong Wushang and Xiedanqiong were currently in an incomparable state of ecstasy and were completely unaware of this. Not only had they come to Jiyu Duxing's side, they had also brought along the Grim Reaper at the same time, the deadliest Grim Reaper, the most terrifying nightmare, the most terrifying demon. At this moment, Mo Lei, who was following closely behind, suddenly felt an unprecedented sense of oppression. She felt an inexplicable sense of discomfort in her heart. This kind of extremely negative feeling made her heart palpitate for a moment in this kind of atmosphere that should have been ecstatic. What's wrong with me? Mo Lei naturally felt very strange in her heart. Jiyu Duxing was not only Dong Wushang's second brother, but also her own second brother. She had always admired this iron-blooded man who would rather break than bend. Now that she had finally found his whereabouts and arrived at the place where he was hiding, why was she actually still palpitating? This shouldn't be. Mo Lei shook her head and forcibly expelled this extremely uncomfortable negative feeling. With a smile on her face, she flew into the air. Behind her, Mo Yuntian and the other 2 guards followed closely. Everyone had a smile on their faces that came from the bottom of their hearts. His Majesty's wish was finally fulfilled. After surviving a calamity, the reunion of brothers, this was undoubtedly the most worthy thing to celebrate. For the past few days, Jiyu Duxing had been steadily absorbing spiritual energy from the water underground. After the first half of the day, he could already feel a huge amount of spiritual energy being drawn from the water underground. It was flowing into his body in an endless stream in an extremely orderly manner. This kind of feeling was completely different from absorbing spiritual energy from the sky. After his almost dried-up meridians received the sturdiness of the earth and the gentleness of the water, they actually slowly became warm, moist, solid, and filled up. Although the injuries that his body had endured previously still existed and did not even improve in the slightest, it was already not as uncomfortable as before. Besides, Jiyu Duxing even more clearly felt that he was lacking in various aspects in the past. It was precisely because of this sturdiness of the earth and the gentleness of the flowing water that made him feel that the path that he had taken previously was actually a little off. He had blindly pursued fierceness, pursued that kind of lonely feeling at the top. In itself, it was a relatively wrong direction. Without water, it can't be a sword. This was the first realization that Jiyu Duxing had since he was severely injured. It was as if he had seen a sword come into existence from nothing and then start to be forged continuously. The entire process of tempering actually required water. Every time the water was tempered, the impurities of the sword would be extracted from the body of the sword. Bit by bit, and then, finally, it still came out from the water, to form a complete and perfect sword. Without water, there is also no sword. Blindly forging will only turn a piece of steel into a pile of trash. Jiyu Duxing said to himself in his heart. So, the sword can't actually leave water. Jiyu Duxing pondered. But my sword intent in the past was completely without water. So, I have to improve it. But, where exactly do I have to start from? Jiyu Duxing thought for a while, and then sighed heavily. Because, Chu Yang had once told him about the gentleness of water in the sword, and it was not just once. And at that time, he had once accompanied Chu Yang in searching for this gentleness of water for a very long time, but later, he just let it go. Why are you sighing? Is the healing effect not ideal? This can't be rushed. It has to be done slowly. Jiyu Miaoling, who was at the side, asked gently. Jiyu Duxing was a little ashamed. The injury is nothing. Although it didn't get better, it didn't worsen either. I have other thoughts. Indeed, if you don't personally experience it, no matter how reasonable it is, it's just a passing wind. Once it has passed, let it go. Just now, I was actually regretting something in the past. There was once a sword principle that was clearly placed in front of me, and it had already become a standard. But I didn't cherish it and let it go. Chapter 2587. Now, at the end of the road, I know that principle is actually true. It's the path to the peak that can only be achieved after countless trials and tribulations. Jiyu Duxing sighed, full of regret. Jiyu Miaoling said softly, yes. Often, when we are young, there are many principles that our parents and elders remind us of every day. But we just listen and then forget. We never truly experience it. And we even complain that they are too long-winded. They say the same thing thousands of times. Isn't it annoying? But only when we really grow up and understand this principle through our own personal experience, do we truly understand. But by the time we understand it, it may already be too late. Because, the detours that we have taken, the years that we have lost, we will never turn back. In this world, isn't the most difficult medicine to find the medicine of regret? Sister Xiao Miao, who was always gentle, actually made a rare joke in order to appease her little brother at this moment. Jiyu Duxing still sighed deeply. He seriously recalled every word that Chu Yang said back then. The more he thought about it, the more regretful he felt. Not only did Big Boss talk about the gentle strength of water, even Big Boss also talked about the heavy strength of earth. Jiyu Duxing's gaze was heavy with memories. Now I understand that no matter what kind of hard metal it is, no matter which plane it was in, its original form is actually the earth. From the coincidences of the earth, these things are condensed, that's what the so-called metal is. Only by forging metal into materials can there be weapons. Continuously tempering water, continuously polishing, only then can there be divine weapons. And in this, the thing that plays the biggest role. Actually, it may not be the spiritual energy of the sky. Most of the decisive factors actually come from the soil and the water. Only by combining these three into one can one be truly invincible in the universe. Jiyu Duxing said in a daze, "This is the true essence of the sword." Jiyu Miaoling exposed a gentle smile. Little brother, it's not too late for you to understand this principle now. Only when you recover from your injuries, your strength will go further. You will understand the true essence. There will be no more obstacles in your path and you can look forward to the great Tao. This is really something to be happy about. Jiyu Duxing looked at her. He sighed helplessly. This was because he was very clear about Jiyu Miaoling's current state of mind. She was indeed happy for him. Her heart was also happy and gratified. However, Jiyu Miaoling herself felt the same as when she had first heard Chu Yang's words. He felt that it made sense, and he felt comfortable listening to it. But he didn't have the enthusiasm to practice it himself. Because Jiyu Miaoling had never experienced it, but Jiyu Duxing didn't say anything else, because he knew. These principles of martial arts were the same as the principles of life that had been passed down through the ages. He had never experienced it before. Or maybe it was just a sentence. Only by personally experiencing it would it become a saying of wisdom, and only then would it have meaning. This was also, there were some principles that the entire continent knew, and everyone could talk about it. However, those who could truly understand this simple principle might not even be 1 in 10,000 people. What is learned on paper is ultimately shallow. Knowing this matter must be done personally. Jiyu Duxing murmured. That makes sense. That's how it is. Jiyu Miaoling smiled faintly. You continue to cultivate and heal. I'll think of a way to go out and see if I can catch a big fish back. Be careful. Don't make any noise and attract unnecessary trouble. Jiyu Duxing smiled and reminded, the knot in my heart has been untied. I just need to rest for a few more days and I'll be able to move freely again. At that time, I'll have to think of a way to nurse the unconscious old Bu. Old Bu has already been unconscious for a few days. This can't go on. I know. Jiyu Miaoling smiled and walked out. Jiyu Duxing's healing had made progress. Jiyu Miaoling was completely relieved. She suddenly felt that even though they were underground, it was still sunny. Jiyu Duxing smiled faintly and continued to cultivate. He continued to absorb the earth and water elemental energy. He continued to feel the opportunity that he had once missed. He felt the luck that he had lost and regained. He could feel that as he absorbed, the energy of true spirit underground was surging towards him. Moreover, there was a faint feeling of heat in his body. This feeling was absolutely real. He would often sweat all over after cultivating for a while. Moreover, what made Jiyu Duxing even more surprised was that the energy of true spirit underground was actually so huge. It was almost inexhaustible. This incomparably huge energy made Jiyu Duxing feel incomparably shocked. It seemed that the energy of true spirit underground was much more than the energy in the sky. This was an unimaginable realization. The sky was incomparably vast. The energy of true spirit floating in the sky was truly inexhaustible. And underground, it existed in a solid state. It was the hardest to transmit the energy of true spirit underground. How could it store and transmit such a huge amount of energy? It was really inconceivable. Could it be that this energy of true spirit was originally floating in the sky? Over time, a part of it sank and entered the ground, and was absorbed by the ground. And the other part was light and flew up, higher and higher. Finally, it flew to an unknown place. If that's the case, doesn't it mean that the sky that we've been using to cultivate is actually the place where the energy of true spirit is the poorest? And the real treasure is underground, or is it outside the sky? It's just that we cultivators have never understood and never excavated these treasures in the true sense. Gu Duxing was shocked by this thought of his. Another night passed. Gu Duxing felt that his cultivation seemed to have recovered a little. And the injuries caused by the sage were already faintly showing signs of breaking and dissolving in front of this dense energy of the earth. This feeling made Gu Duxing overjoyed. Perhaps, if he was given another half a month's time, he would be able to recover on his own. And, at that time, his cultivation would definitely be able to take another step forward, another big step forward. When he faced the sage again, even if he was still no match for him, at least it wouldn't be like before. Completely unable to withstand a single blow, without any ability to resist. But at this time, he suddenly felt that his state of mind was suddenly shaken. It was as if something close to him was rapidly approaching him, and it was full of joy as it rushed towards him, wanting to throw itself into his embrace. Gu Duxing instantly understood the source of this feeling. Black Dragon Sword. Sword Spirit. It must be the return of the Black Dragon Sword's sword spirit. It was a surprise that came out of nowhere. It made Gu Duxing almost faint. The Black Dragon Sword, which he regarded as a close companion for life, wasn't by his side these few days. Although he didn't say it, he was definitely not used to it. Now, it actually found itself back and returned to his embrace. This was a huge surprise. How could Gu Duxing not be overjoyed? What made him even more overjoyed was that he heard two voices shouting. Second brother Gu. I'm Xiedanqiong. Wushang and I are here. These two voices made Gu Duxing tremble all over. He was so excited that he almost cried. My brothers. Are you guys here? And you guys even brought my Black Dragon Sword. In such a desperate situation, to suddenly be able to reunite with his brothers, what kind of feeling was that? At this moment, Gu Duxing simply wanted to shout, I'm here, but, just as he was about to shout, he suddenly stopped. Because, at this moment, it was a cold and extremely uncomfortable feeling. Suddenly, it surged. This feeling made Gu Duxing shut his mouth at once. And, with the fastest action, he covered the mouth of Gu Miaoling, who was about to shout out in joy. Because this sudden feeling made Gu Duxing feel a chill all over his body. That feeling, it was as if my life had already come to an end. Why do I have such a feeling? Why do I have such a feeling? My brothers outside are definitely here in person. We've been brothers for so long. Not to mention shouting, even if they were panting softly, no one would be able to pretend to be either of them in front of me, let alone two of them. And I can totally hear that they are full of energy and high spirits at this moment. Their purpose of coming here is to welcome me. Why do I have such an extreme feeling that my life has come to an end? What's the problem? What's the problem? Gu Duxing buried his head in deep thought, not daring to make the slightest move. This feeling came too suddenly, too real, so real that Gu Duxing couldn't accept it. Often, the more seriously injured one was, the sharper one's senses would be. The more one's cultivation was gone, the sharpness of one's consciousness would be several times sharper than before. If this feeling is real, it means that I'm about to face a disaster. It doesn't matter if it falls on me, but if it implicates my brothers, I won't be able to rest in peace even if I die. Regretfully, I can't act rashly at this moment. Gu Duxing frowned and sensed silently. He clearly felt the anxious and longing cries of Dong Wushang and the others, and the excitement of the Black Dragon Sword wanting to return to his hands. Then, Gu Duxing suddenly trembled all over. His eyes overflowed with a long-lost sharp light. I've finally found it. I've finally found the source of my fear. It's actually my Black Dragon Sword. As the original owner of the Black Dragon Sword, the person who gave birth to the Sword Soul, Gu Duxing's familiarity with his Black Dragon Sword had already reached the point where he could see everything. He was clear about the composition of every part of the Black Dragon sword. Even every characteristic of the sword soul was clear in his heart. Now, the sword soul was still the original sword soul, without any damage. Moreover, it was also really eager to see him again. The only thing that wasn't right was, beside the sword soul, there was still a ball of extremely cold energy, like a viper lurking in the dark, waiting for an opportunity to move, looking for people to devour. Chapter 2588. The evilness and coldness of this power made one's hair stand on end. And what made Jiyu Du Xing the most fearful was, this power was hidden in the Black Dragon sword, and even the sword spirit itself didn't detect it. And this power was actually very familiar to him, because this power was exactly the same as the power that had seriously injured him. It was actually the work of the same person. Only Saint Monarch. Oh no. Jiyu Du Xing, who understood the dangerous situation in front of him, suddenly opened his eyes wide. Danger? What danger? Jiyu Miaoling's mouth was still covered by him, and she asked with her eyes. We are in danger, and the situation that Dong Wushang and Xiedan Qiong are facing now is even more dangerous. Jiyu Du Xing almost lost his sense of propriety at this moment. He took a deep breath and calmed himself down, but he still felt that his mind was in a mess, and it was difficult for him to calm down. Only Saint Monarch must have known the relationship between us brothers, and also knew that my brother wouldn't tolerate my sword falling into the enemy's hands. So, he set up a trap and deliberately let them steal the Black Dragon sword. And Saint Monarch set up an extremely ingenious tracking spiritual sense on the Black Dragon sword. As long as they find me, only Saint Monarch will immediately make a move without any worries, and Saint Monarch didn't make a move before they found me. So, from this, I can infer that only Saint Monarch's plan is to catch all of us in one fell swoop. So, he is waiting for me to appear. As long as I appear, it will be the time for him to make a move. In other words, if I don't appear for the time being, they won't be in any danger for the time being. Jiyu Duxing frowned. At this moment, his heart had already thought of too many things. Is it like this? Am I right in my conjecture? Then, how should I inform them? Right now, my cultivation hasn't recovered, and I can't use the secret message at all. Even if I use it, it will be intercepted by Saint Monarch, and my position will be exposed earlier. What should I do? Jiyu Du Xing was very worried, and for a moment, he couldn't think of any solution. But one thing was already very certain, the crisis was already imminent. How to break this deadly deadlock? At this moment, he heard a voice above his head. Dong Wushang's hearty laughter could be heard. Second brother Jiyu, ha ha ha. The sword spirit stopped here, so you must be here. Don't tell me you want me to turn this place upside down and dig you out. Hearing this, Jiyu Duxing's heart suddenly quivered. Oh no. This time, it was really, really bad. At this moment, Jiyu Duxing's heart felt as if it had fallen into an ice cave. Dong Wushang and the others had come for him. At this moment, Jiyu Duxing was overjoyed to have found his traces. He could even imagine the faces of his brothers as if he had seen them. What an ecstasy! However, the more this was the case, the more anxious Jiyu Duxing became. You two idiots. You don't even know that someone is following you. They were not as familiar with the Black Dragon sword as he was with it. At this moment, they were so fearless. However, with this shout, they had pushed themselves into a desperate situation. It was because of the person who had tracked them. It was a nightmare, but it was also a death god. He was already on the verge of death. Even if he died later, it didn't matter. He had earned these days to live in an ignoble manner. However, once they really fought, Dong Wushang and the others would definitely not be able to escape. They would definitely be buried together. There was no chance. What should he do? Jiyu Duxing was so anxious that his heart was about to burst. However, there was no other way. There was nothing he could do. He was at his wit's end. Because Jiyu Duxing knew how terrifying a Saint Monarch was. After this call, whether he appeared or not, the result was already the same. The outcome of everyone dying here was already destined. The only one who had a chance of survival was Jiyu Duxing took a deep breath and said softly, Sister Xiao Miao. Stay here first and take care of old Bu. You must remember, no matter what happens later, don't go out. You must remember. After saying that, he forced himself to stand up. Jiyu Miaoling seemed to have realized something and asked in surprise, Isn't it Dong Wushang and Xie Danqiong outside? They are our brothers. What are you worried about? We need help now. It's rare for them to rush over. Jiyu Duxing smiled bitterly. His face was gloomy as he said, if it was just them, everything would be fine. However, it's not just Dong Wushang and Xie Danqiong who came now. There's also the Saint Monarch. He followed Dong Wushang and the others here. Don't forget how I lost my black dragon sword. How could I get it back so easily? This is a trap meticulously arranged by the Saint Monarch, a trap targeted at us brothers. Jiyu Miaoling instantly understood. Her face instantly became as white as snow, without any trace of blood. She reached out and covered her mouth. Only then did she manage to block that exclamation in time. I, Jiyu Duxing, only have regret at this moment. I wish I could have died long ago. It's better than implicating my brothers now. Jiyu Duxing looked up to the sky and sighed. He was infinitely remorseful. Fine, I'll die together with my brothers. Now that things have come to this, what else can I do? Jiyu Duxing turned to leave. However, Jiyu Miaoling called out, Wait. She bent down and poured the last bit of the spring of life into the mouth of the still unconscious Bu Liuqing. Then, she placed a space ring filled with food on Bu Liuqing's chest. She murmured, Elder Bu. You have to wake up. You have to live well. Then, she stood up and smiled. Little brother, I'll go out with you. Didn't we agree long ago that we would accompany each other in life and death? Jiyu Duxing looked at her fixedly. For a long time, he finally didn't speak. After a long while, he said hoarsely, All right. In this world, the person who understood Jiyu Duxing the most was Jiyu Miaoling. On the other hand, the person who understood Sister Xiao Miao the most was little brother Jiyu. The two of them walked out side by side just like that. Some words. There was no need to say any more. Persuasion had already become blasphemy to Jiyu Miaoling at this moment. Jiyu Miaoling walked all the way. Her face actually revealed a gentle smile that hadn't been seen for a long time. The corner of her eyes locked onto the man beside her. A sense of happiness and satisfaction rose in her heart. Back when she was at the heavens, she had long wished to be husband and wife with her little brother in this life. Even if it was just for a day, this life was enough. She didn't have any regrets. Moreover, they had spent such a long time together. This life was enough. How could there be any regrets? The two of them walked out side by side. They could feel each other's hearts. They were tightly connected together. They were more intimate than ever before. In the sky, Sheng Jun's eyes flashed strangely. He revealed a smug smile that showed that his scheme had succeeded. Found it. Finally found it. That great trouble was indeed here. Black Dragon Sword. He stopped moving when he reached here. That had already proved everything. Jiyu Duxing, I want to see where else you can run to. Sheng Jun's eyes flashed with an extremely cruel light. He looked down closely. Jiyu Duxing, you should be appearing soon, right? At the lakeside, on the shore, Dong Wushang and Xie Danqiong stood there. They were still shouting freely. They seemed extremely excited. But Jiyu Duxing hadn't appeared yet. Did he not appear because his injuries were too serious? Or maybe he wasn't confident. Sheng Jun narrowed his eyes. He still waited patiently. I'm patient. I can wait. All of a sudden, the calm lake below suddenly spun. Water splashed. The next moment, hundreds and thousands of water arrows shot into the sky without warning. Then, they turned into a huge fog in an instant. It filled the sky. For a moment, the fog filled the surroundings. One couldn't even see their own fingers. With a swoosh, Jiyu Duxing and Jiyu Miaoling appeared on the shore. Dong Wushang and the rest were still wondering why Jiyu Duxing was nowhere to be seen. At this moment, they suddenly saw Jiyu Duxing and his companion appear. Before they could even cheer, they heard Jiyu Duxing hurriedly say, "All of you, listen to me. If you still treat me as your second brother, leave this place immediately. Leave at full speed. No matter what happens, don't look back. Otherwise, I, Jiyu Duxing, will not die in peace." His words were spoken in a hurry. After he finished speaking, he immediately shouted, "Let's go." Dong Wushang was stunned for a moment upon hearing this, but Xie Danqiong and Mo Lei were both quick-witted people. They instantly realized what was going on. Has someone tampered with the Black Dragon sword? Someone tracked it here because of this? The two of them were extremely puzzled. On one hand, it was Jiyu Duxing's attitude. Even if Jiyu Duxing had not recovered from his serious injuries, he had Dong Wushang, Xie Danqiong, Mo Lei and 3 of Mo Yuntian's 7 Stars guards. With this lineup, even if the descendants of Die came to invade, they would only be defeated. Was there a need to be so serious? Then, they thought that after they got the Black Dragon sword, they had already checked it carefully and didn't find anything unusual. If there was a tracking divine sense on it, it should have been discovered by them long ago. Could it be that Jiyu Duxing was worrying too much? No, with Jiyu Duxing's character, he definitely wouldn't be like this. But if there really was a tracking divine sense, then it meant that, in the entire Heaven Imperial Court, there was only one person who could do this. Thinking of this, the two of them felt their hearts sink. Don't ask too much, don't hesitate anymore. Jiyu Duxing's eyes were bloodshot. It's too late. Leave quickly. Right at this moment, a gust of wind suddenly rose in the sky. The thick fog in the sky instantly disappeared without a trace. It was all light and light. A voice said, "Leave. Where to go? Why do you have to do something unnecessary? Ha ha ha." With a burst of wild laughter, a man with a mask on his head and an exceptionally fat figure slowly floated down. Dong Wushang took a big step forward and shouted, "Who's there?" With these 3 steps, he had already blocked Jiyu Duxing and Jiyu Miaoling behind him. Dong Wushang's body was majestic and tall. Although he was about the same height as Jiyu Duxing, with such a block, it was very solid. If he didn't move away, no one opposite him would see that there were 2 people behind him. "I'm in Harbin now. In the afternoon, I'll go to the film base to take a look. I'll write when I get back at night. I'll update later." Chapter 2589. Seeing this, Jiyu Duxing was angry and anxious. He scolded angrily, "Bastard. I asked you to leave quickly. Why are you blocking in front of me? Are you courting death?" Dong Wushang was unmoved, holding his saber. At this moment, he already knew that the enemy in front of him was not ordinary. To be able to make Jiyu Duxing so wary, he must be extremely difficult to deal with, even strong enough to threaten their lives. But he was still calm and composed. He laughed heartily and said, "Second brother, this guy was lured here because we were careless. Now that things have come to this, I won't say anything about who is right and who is wrong, much less say anything about sorry. But since you and I are gathered together, then of course, we will face all enemies together and face them together. I know that you want us to have a chance to live, to let us escape, but, if we abandon you like this, isn't it the same as watching you die? Even if we survive, what face do we have to face the world for the rest of our days? In short, regardless of life or death, just fight." Dong Wushang roared, his voice like thunder. He pointed his saber forward and shouted, "If you want to kill my second brother Jiyu, you have to kill me first." Jiyu Duxing's heart was in turmoil. Dong Wushang's words had suddenly filled his mind. It was because of Jiyu Duxing that Dong Wushang and the rest came here. It was because Dong Wushang and the rest came here that the strong enemy was lured to Jiyu Duxing's hiding place. Dong Wushang's purpose of coming here was to save Jiyu Duxing. And Jiyu Duxing's purpose was to let his brothers live. But now that things have come to this, there was no more meaning in saying anything more. Because neither Dong Wushang nor Xie Danqiong would leave, Jiyu Duxing would also not blame them for falling into the enemy's trap and bringing the danger of death here. Now that things have come to this, let's not say anything about who is right and who is wrong. And let's not say anything about sorry. But since we are gathered together, of course, we will face all enemies together and face them together. In short, regardless of life or death, just fight. That's right. Gu Duxing was agitated. He roared, face it together. Face it together. Regardless of life or death, just fight. Mo Lei and Xie Danqiong had also floated over and stood on both sides of Dong Wushang. Mo Yuntian's 3 great 7-star bodyguards spread out. This person must have followed us here. But just as Dong Wushang had said, he was full of regret. Annoyed. Guilt and all those negative emotions were of no help at all. They were of no help at all. The only thing he could do now was to face it head-on. However, Xie Danqiong and the others were puzzled. Who is this person? Was he really a saint? The majority of the people here had seen the sage before. He was short and stout, and regardless of his figure, bearing, behavior, or even the cultivation fluctuations that flowed around his body, they were all completely different from the sage. Was this person a saint or not? Other than Gu Duxing, everyone else. He couldn't help but have a thought that even he didn't believe. Perhaps, this person actually wasn't a saint. If this person isn't a saint, then our side will have a great chance of survival. Indeed, if it wasn't a saint monarch in front of them, it was indeed difficult to find anyone in the entire Heaven Imperial Court who could do anything to Dong Wushang's group. On the opposite side, the short and stout masked man let out an extremely unpleasant laugh and said, "Not bad, not bad. You guys are indeed loyal. I really admire you guys, but I definitely won't let you guys off. Regarding this, I'm actually also very regretful." His tone was filled with confidence that everything was under his control, and the delight of a cat toying with a mouse. He had originally made up his mind that as long as Gu Duxing appeared, he would immediately take action and quickly get rid of everyone. But he didn't expect that Gu Duxing actually discovered him one step ahead of him, and then created a concealment mist that filled the sky, blocking his vision in all directions. So much so that he wasn't able to take action at the first moment. This unforeseen event made the killing intent in his heart burn even more. So what if he could fight for a moment? Even if the people here were to scatter and flee, this Saint Monarch could still calmly kill them one by one. There was also the advantage of defeating them one by one. At most, it would just be a slight delay in death. Unexpectedly, he didn't see the scene of everyone scattering and fleeing. Instead, he saw a great show of brotherly affection, and even felt that soaring battle intent. This result made him suddenly have an unprecedented kind of mania and anger in his heart. Brotherly affection? I'll let you guys see what true brotherly affection is. In the face of this beautiful and infinitely warm relationship, an impulse to destroy it rose in his heart. How could such a feeling exist in this world? How could you guys possibly have something that even I don't have? What a joke. Let's see how I'm going to shatter this feeling and turn it into a complete joke. Life and death together? That's just wishful thinking of a lunatic. But he also knew that if he directly took action and fought to his heart's content, no matter how long it took, Gu Duxing and the rest wouldn't be afraid of death. In the chaotic battle, everyone had died in one place. Instead, it had fulfilled this sincere feeling. Fulfill? This was something that the Saint Monarch didn't want no matter what. So he simply floated down and chose to fight head-on. His heart was filled with endless brutality. With just the few of you, so what if your battle intent is too strong? In the face of absolute power, all struggles are futile. It's just that you won't die for the time being, because I won't let you die so easily. I'll let you guys see with your own eyes how that so-called brotherly affection, the brotherly affection that you're so proud of, can't withstand a single blow. How easily it can be destroyed. Who exactly are you? Dong Wushang's eyes shot out a sharp glint as he asked the question that everyone wanted to know the most. The Saint Monarch laughed loudly. Who am I? I'm just someone who wants your lives, that's all. Everyone was enraged. As soon as this person appeared, he created a terrifying pressure that filled the heavens and the earth, as well as an unparalleled and shocking aura. This made them feel that even if they joined forces, they still wouldn't be a match for this person before them, or they would be defeated and die in an instant. But when they heard what the other party said, everyone was enraged and their battle intent increased greatly. Jiyu Duxing patted Dong Wushang's shoulder with his hand. Dong Wushang understood and turned his body slightly. Jiyu Duxing walked to the front step by step. He reached out and took the black dragon sword from Mo Leiyer's hand. The black dragon sword let out an extremely joyful sword hum. The sword's body shone brightly, and a terrifying sharpness appeared once again. Finally, it was back in the hands of its master. This feeling was really good. Jiyu Duxing looked at the black dragon sword affectionately. He felt that his battle power seemed to be recovering bit by bit at this moment. Then, he raised his head and quietly looked at the short and fat man opposite him. He said indifferently, "The only me saint, whose name shakes the heavens and is number one at the pinnacle, would actually do such a despicable thing. Do you not dare to show your face? You even changed your posture. What are you afraid of? At this moment, you still want to deceive people and continue to be sanctimonious and deceive the world." Jiyu Duxing's words made Dong Wushang and the others' hearts jolt. This short and fat man in front of them was the only saint monarch? Although everyone had already vaguely guessed it from Jiyu Duxing's anxious expression just now and the shocking aura that this person had displayed, there was an essential difference between guessing and confirming. After confirming the identity of this person, even that trace of luck didn't exist anymore. Opposite him, the saint blinked his eyes in surprise. "The only saint monarch? You said I'm the saint monarch? Ha 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 ha." His laughter was extremely joyful, as if he had encountered something extremely funny and ridiculous. Jiyu Duxing didn't even blink. He said indifferently, "It's fine if you don't want to admit it. This is a reasonable thing. It's just that, please remember one thing. When you think that others are stupid, you may not necessarily not be a joke in their eyes," he said mockingly, "or a clown." Jiyu Duxing. The sage didn't laugh anymore. His gaze was cold as he looked at Jiyu Duxing. The solitary emperor is rumored to be a man of few words. I didn't expect that you, who's about to become a dead man, would actually become so eloquent. It's just a pity that even if you can speak extravagantly, you'll still die. However, I can let you die after these brothers of yours. Jiyu Duxing's expression didn't change at all. He still said mockingly, "Since we are going to die today, what difference does it make who dies first and who dies later? Instead, it's you. I believe that no one will know what you've done. Why don't you show your true face? Could it be that you're afraid in your heart? Afraid that you can't kill us? Or that you don't have the confidence to wipe out all of us here? Afraid that there will be a fish that escapes the net and announces your actions to the world?" The saint's eyes became even colder. He suddenly laughed and said, "Afraid? Why would I be afraid? If you're talking about being afraid, you should be the only one who is afraid, right? Afraid that I'll kill all of you? Because of you alone, everyone here will be buried with you." Jiyu Duxing laughed and said coldly, "Just based on a person like you who hides the head but shows the tail? Are you worthy?" Jiyu Duxing had always been a man of few words. If he could speak less, he would never speak more. If he could not speak, he would not speak. Even if he was scolding people, he usually didn't have any brilliant words. But this time, he was extremely sarcastic. It could be considered the first time in his life that he had done this. Not only was he worried about the safety of his brothers, he was also trying to incite the anger of the enemy, looking for an opportunity to take advantage of. The most important point was, towards people like the saint, Jiyu Duxing no longer had any tolerance for them. They were too despicable, too shameless, too filthy, too despicable. As the number one person in the imperial court, he actually used such despicable methods. He was simply unscrupulous. He had no demeanor and was sneaky. Even as an enemy, he was sincerely disappointing. Dong Wushang said seriously, "Second brother, is this person really the saint?" Chapter 2590. Jiyu Duxing smiled bitterly. Only the person himself can track his own divine sense. I don't need to say more about this common sense. Dong Wushang, Xie Danqiong and Mo Leiyer's pupils contracted at the same time. Since the person in front of them was the only saint, then this battle would be a battle to the death. With an unbeatable enemy in front of them, they didn't have any fear. Instead, a fervent fighting spirit suddenly rose. It was a kind of extreme killing intent that was thousands of miles long and filled with a heavy aura. "So you're the only saint." Dong Wushang pointed his black saber forward. The blade shone and a faint halo formed at the tip of the saber. He said slowly, "You're the one who injured my brother." The saint sneered. "Ridiculous. How can you be so imposing when you're speaking without thinking? How ridiculous." Dong Wushang's gaze didn't move, but his clothes fluttered without wind. It was as if he was standing in a storm. He said heavily, "It doesn't matter if you admit it or not. You're not a saint, you're a bastard. You're a saint, and a bastard." "Bastard." Dong Wushang looked up to the sky and roared. "Die." The Lord Sage was infuriated by Dong Wushang calling him a bastard again and again. He was about to make a move when he saw that Dong Wushang had already made the first move. Buzz. The black saber let out a violent vibration. Boom. The headband on Dong Wushang's head suddenly exploded. His head of black hair stood upright and danced in the air. The next moment, Dong Wushang's entire body suddenly rushed out. He took a step forward. He landed with a loud bang. The moment his feet stepped on the ground, the wind suddenly surged and the clouds surged. The mountains and rivers shook. In the eyes of the saint, Dong Wushang's first step brought along an extremely violent spatial black hole, mountains, rivers, and earth. They were shocked together. They shook together. Such a majestic aura was enough to shake mountains. It made people's vision and soul beat violently together. Boom. Dong Wushang's gaze was incomparably persistent. With a spirit that was determined to die, he didn't stop and took the second step. Suddenly, the sky seemed to be covered by dark clouds. In an instant, lightning flashed and thunder roared. At this moment, the sound of thunder was deafening as if it had gone crazy. In the real world, none of this actually happened, but everyone who saw Dong Wushang take these two steps had the same feeling at the same time. This was not an illusion, but a true feeling that originated from his senses. Boom. Dong Wushang took the third step. He had already reached a distance of 15 meters in front of the sage. The sage's pupils shrank. After this step, he could clearly feel it. Mountain-river compression. It condensed on the saber. Charge. Earth compression. It condensed on the saber. Charge. Thunder condensed. It condensed on the saber. Charge. Lightning condensed. The firmament condensed. Star condensation. Saber. Black saber. Shaking mountains, carrying thunder and lightning, waving the sun, moon, wind, and clouds, connecting heaven and earth. Coming straight at him. It came right at his face. Dong Wushang let out a long howl. "Look at this saber strike of yours, Fourth Master Dong." When he said the words Fourth Master Dong, Dong Wushang suddenly thought of the Sworn Brotherhood, and a lofty feeling arose in his heart. "I used to call myself Second Master Dong." But he didn't know when he had changed it to Fourth Master Dong. They became sworn brothers. "I'm the fourth." His burly body suddenly rose into the air, and together with his saber, it was as if the whole firmament was suddenly smashed down by a bolt of lightning. A hint of shock flashed across the sage's eyes. This saber strike was one that the sage had never seen before in his long life of more than 1,000,000 years and countless battles. Such a domineering and powerful aura, such an unparalleled and lofty spirit. In the whole world, since time immemorial, only Dong Wushang in front of him could unleash such power. The first saber strike after the creation of heaven and earth. Facing this saber strike, the sage took it seriously, which was extremely rare. According to the sage's prediction, among Dong Wushang and the others, Jiyu Duxing had not recovered from his serious injuries. Although he had reappeared now, he could still form a fighting force. As for the others, Dong Wushang, Xie Danqiong, and Great Emperor Wu Shong's wife were the strongest. None of them was below Wu Yequang, but that was all. As for Mo Yuntian's 3 7-stars guards, although they also had the strength of a peak saint, in terms of threat, they were far inferior to Dong Wushang and the others. This was the difference in realm, and it couldn't be made up with numbers. But Dong Wushang's attack had greatly surprised the sage. The current Dong Wushang was at least stronger than Jiyu Duxing when he was fighting with Wu Yequang. In other words, Dong Wushang was also someone who could pose a threat. That saber strike just now could already prove this point. Just as the sage had judged, the current Dong Wushang was indeed slightly stronger than Jiyu Duxing when he was fighting with Wu Yequang. Actually, speaking of which, Jiyu Duxing and Dong Wushang had always been on par. Their cultivations were similar, their realms were similar, and their fighting prowess was very similar. It was just that recently, Dong Wushang had 2 more experiences than Jiyu Duxing. One was the battle with the sage's clone, and the other was the guidance given by Chu Yang after he made a breakthrough. These 2 experiences had allowed Dong Wushang to improve considerably. He was indeed stronger than Jiyu Duxing when he was fighting with Wu Yequang. The sage flipped his wrist and took a step back. A ray of light shot out from his hand, and a long sword with a strange appearance appeared in his hand. Then, he swung the sword upward. This sword brought along all the aura in this part of the world to meet the attack head-on. He had changed his appearance and naturally wouldn't use his signature weapon, the mountain and river sword. But even if he didn't use the mountain and river sword, the sage still had absolute confidence. He could defeat Dong Wushang. Even if it was such a peerless saber strike, the sage still had the confidence to destroy it head-on. Faced with such a confident saber strike that was full of spirit, energy, and spirit, only by destroying it head-on could he attack the heart of the saber. In fact, Dong Wushang's saber strike was completely natural. Other than facing it head-on, there was indeed no other way to deal with it. The sage's move was just the most suitable method. Behind, Jiyu Duxing held Jiyu Miaoling's slender waist. Xie Danqiong and Mo Leiya understood and flew back at the same time. In an instant, they were already high up in the air on the surface of the lake. They reached the opposite side of the lake. But they weren't doing this to escape. The sage's divine consciousness had already locked onto them. Once they scattered and escaped, it would be easier for them to be defeated one by one. They wouldn't escape either. They wouldn't be so stupid. And it was also because Dong Wushang was still here, fighting. Everyone just watched. They didn't join forces because Dong Wushang's saber strike was completely natural. Joining forces rashly would only destroy the perfection of this saber strike. This was Dong Wushang's most powerful and most extreme saber strike in his life. This saber strike. Unless the current Jiyu Duxing regained his peak strength, he would be qualified to join forces. Only then would he be qualified to join hands with them. Or, Chu Yang's timely arrival would be the icing on the cake. Other than that, even if Xue Leihan, whose cultivation far surpassed Dong Wushang, came, he would definitely not be able to interfere. Boom! The saber and sword finally collided. They collided without any tricks. At this moment, it felt as if a meteorite falling from the sky at extreme speed suddenly crashed into the earth. Dong Wushang's saber was a meteorite in the sky. Cloudmaster's sword was the vast earth. This fight. An extreme collision. The small island under the sage's feet couldn't withstand such a domineering force. Suddenly, it split open from the middle and water rushed up to the sky. After the fight, Dong Wushang let out a muffled groan and retreated in the air. He flew unsteadily behind his body and fluttered toward the opposite side. The sage also let out a muffled groan, but he didn't retreat at all. The earth under his feet had already turned into a lake and wasn't affected at all. He even rose into the air and turned into a ray of sword light, chasing after Dong Wushang, who was sent flying. When a meteorite in the sky bombarded the vast earth, it had to bear the counterattack of the vast earth. But the sage couldn't help but praise in his heart. Although Cloudmaster was definitely unwilling to praise his opponent, Dong Wushang's saber strike had already reached a level where even the sage couldn't help but praise it. Because although Dong Wushang was sent flying backward, the dark saber in his hand was still pointed at him, not flustered in the slightest. And as he retreated, it seemed that the mountains and rivers on his side were also retreating with him. Condensing, they retreated together with Dong Wushang. At this moment, the sage faintly felt that Dong Wushang was like a meteorite that was transforming into the earth, gradually reaching his own height. Although Dong Wushang's saber strike was repelled and he must have been seriously injured, the sage's strike didn't destroy his saber heart. It didn't even have the slightest effect. Although Dong Wushang's cultivation was far inferior to the sage's, his saber heart's firmness was unassailable. Even if the sage condensed the power of the entire heaven and earth into one strike, it was still useless in the end. Perhaps to Dong Wushang, the sage's power might be strong and unparalleled. But even if you can destroy my physical body and my divine soul, you can never destroy my saber heart. Innate saber heart. Sage only thought of these words, and the killing intent in his heart burned even more. Another genius. A genius that was even more annoying than Jiu Duxing. That Jiu Duxing was a threat to him because he had an innate saber heart. He didn't expect that among his brothers, there was great Emperor Wushang who had an innate saber heart. Fortunately, these two geniuses were going to die today. They were going to go on their way together. These two people must die. Otherwise, with just the combination of these two people, they would be able to surpass Xue Liahan and Zi Hao in the future. They were enough to pose a threat to him, a threat that was enough to be fatal. Fortunately, the sage's body and sword transformed into a long rainbow, chasing after Dong Wushang. Although he started later, he arrived first. Obviously, he intended to kill. Dong Wushang's body was still in mid-air, still above the lake, but the sage's long rainbow had already arrived. Dong Wushang shouted and suddenly swung his dark saber in a big circle. A thick five-colored light followed and turned into a big circle. As he retreated, he brazenly slashed with his saber. Chapter 2591. It was as if the endless space, mountains, rivers, and sky were all brought over by the power of this saber. Covering the top of the head, it suddenly smashed down. It smashed on the long rainbow that was chasing after him. After the first saber strike, there was another loud shout. Another saber strike. Dong Wushang's body was in midair as he rapidly retreated. He continued to attack with his saber in such a manner. Every saber strike was a full circle, and the end of each saber strike was the next one. He accumulated his power again, and slashed out again. Every saber strike was a full circle, and the end point was also the end point. It was endless and endless. Boom, 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 boom. The water in the lake below was stirred up by the energy flowing down from above. The water rushed up to the sky and didn't fall down. Looking from afar, it was as if there was a huge piece of jade that connected the sky and the earth. It just condensed in the air and didn't disperse. 10 sabers. 10 complete saber wheels in a row. Dong Wushang's body was still in midair. He hacked out 10 saber wheels in succession. Then, his body finally retreated across the surface of the lake, and arrived in the sky above another piece of land. Blood was gushing out of his 7 orifices in this round of head-on clashes. However, his eyes were still brimming with a resolute fighting spirit and a resolute killing intent. Bang! Rustle! A sound that sounded like something breaking suddenly rang out. That sound made people feel as if all the flowers in the world bloomed at the same time. Blooming stamens. Flying flowers in the sky and earth. Xie Danqiong roared softly. Then, between Saint Jun and Dong Wushang, the dreamlike viburnum flowers bloomed without any warning. The viburnum flowers were endless, as if they were going to stretch to the ends of the world. There was no place in the sky that didn't have flowers. Even the bright starry sky was connected. Everything was dreamy and blurry. The boundless viburnum flowers suddenly burst out. Rising and falling in midair, it actually completely withstood the saint's attack that was pursuing Dong Wushang. Xie Danqiong's tall figure. In a flash, he disappeared in the viburnum flowers that filled the sky. He manipulated the unique viburnum flowers in the Heaven Imperial Court to launch the craziest attack. However, no matter how crazy it always carried a kind of natural elegance and calmness. It was dreamy and blurry. Everything was so natural. Emperor Cheonghua. The sage gave a long and hoarse laugh. What a fine jasper flower. Sure enough, he lived up to his reputation. Unfortunately, this was a peerless jasper flower. It's destined to wither here. Xie Danqiong's voice seemed to be coming from the innumerable viburnum flowers. Even if the viburnum flowers wither, it'll be worth it if I can drag Sage only to the grave with me. The short and stout sage laughed mischievously. when death is at hand, there are still people who are filled with unwillingness. They will always be filled with all kinds of unrealistic fantasies. Viburnum flowers were very beautiful and enchanting. To others, they might even be fatal. But to me, it's very weak. Watch me break your jasper flower, see. Tut. Following that shout, the sage's body suddenly disappeared and turned into a white cloud. The next moment, boom! A loud sound rang out. The hearts of the entire sea of flowers suddenly exploded. Countless viburnum flowers flowed between heaven and earth. Following the huge explosion, it disappeared without a trace. Xie Dan Qiong also let out a muffled groan. His body appeared out of thin air and slowly fell down in a crooked manner. The short and fat figure appeared again, standing steadily in the air. Just as he was about to speak, a transparent sword had already reached his throat in the nick of time. This sword came out of the blue. This enemy should have been invisible for a long time. Caught off guard, the sage was also surprised. He looked down and saw that Dong Wusheng's wife had already disappeared. It seemed that the person who made this move should be Dong Wusheng's wife. He didn't expect that this woman was not only a peerless expert, but also the most outstanding assassin. In the world of assassins, an assassin who could plot against the sage was capable of plotting against anyone. Just this point alone was enough to deter the world. Although the sword was at his throat, the sage could still dodge. However, following the sage's dodge, the long sword also disappeared. The next moment, the long sword had already reached his back. The sage dodged again and the long sword turned to his chest. This sword's movement was extremely fast, so fast that it was like a stream of light. This time, although the sage still tried to dodge, he still couldn't. A blood groove was cut open on his chest. The sage flew into a rage out of humiliation. Since that battle with the East Emperor, how many years had it been since he was injured? He didn't expect that he would be injured here by someone, and by a woman at that. He reached out angrily to grab the sword, but he didn't manage to. As the flowing light flashed again, the long sword locked onto the sage's throat once again. However, the sage's aura suddenly exploded, and the surrounding space was shaken into cracks at the same time. With a miserable groan, a slender figure was shaken out of nothingness. Mo Lei-er. The sage's figure was still standing steadily in the sky. He lowered his head and looked at his chest. The blood had already stopped, and his muscles were also healing rapidly. Almost in an instant, the wound had disappeared. However, the pain of that sword was still in his memory. Today was really full of surprises. Apart from Jiyu Duxing and Dong Wusheng, who had the sword heart and saber heart, the Jade Flower Emperor and this woman were also on the list of people who must be killed. Killer's heart. Boom. It was only at this moment that Dong Wusheng, who was retreating, landed on the ground and staggered backward. Every step he took, the ground would crack with unknown depths. His body was like the condensation of a mountain. Wherever he landed, the ground would crack. He retreated 30 to 40 steps before he stabilized his body. The corners of his mouth were already dripping with blood, and his eyes were almost popping out. Blood spurted out from all the muscles in his body. Although he successfully blocked the sage's attack and didn't regret his saber heart just now, Dong Wusheng's injuries were already very serious. Even though his mentality and spirit didn't lose. After all, there was still a huge gap between cultivation and physical body. Dong Wusheng took in a deep breath and tried to slow down his heartbeat. Looking at the battle in the sky, his fighting spirit was ignited again. Defeat my saber heart? Sage, you can't do it. The stronger the setback, the stronger the fighting spirit. In the sky, Xie Danqiong and Mo Lei retreated and returned. The three guards also attacked with all their might at this moment. In the sky, the five of them surrounded the sage's short and fat figure. They attacked with all their might. On the ground, pieces by pieces were collapsing. The mountains not far away were shaking continuously and were already showing signs of collapse. Countless large rocks rolled down from the top of the mountains crazily. The rumbling sound shook the heaven and earth. Finally, many mountains in the surroundings let out a loud sound at the same time and fell down with a crash. Black smoke burst out from the top of one of the mountains without any warning. The next moment, a gush of red lava shot up into the sky. Countless fiery red rocks shot up into the sky. Under the influence of this battle, the earth veins were directly shaken. A volcano actually erupted here. The surrounding temperature rose to an unbearable level in an instant. All kinds of choking smells were enough to make people faint. The volcano was erupting continuously. It was getting fiercer and fiercer. Gradually, when the first wave of lava came down, the power of the eruption had already reached a height of 10,000 feet. Billowing thick smoke filled the sky. The whole scene was like the end of the world. In the surrounding areas of the battlefield, some experts who didn't know the truth wanted to come over to take a look out of curiosity. However, they were all shaken to death by the aftermath of the battle when they were halfway there. Following the eruption of the first volcano, no less than 10 volcanoes erupted one after another like a signal flare. Countless lava and fiery rocks covered the area of no less than 1,000 miles. In this chaotic situation, which was like the end of the world, a few figures continued to fight fiercely in this high temperature that was enough to melt gold and stone. They were like shuttles and flitting like lightning. Although there were only a few people fighting, the momentum of this great battle was like thousands of horses and thousands of soldiers participating in the battle. It was even more than that. In the sky, from time to time, many similar figures would suddenly appear. Those were rows of afterimages that were inadvertently created by moving at extreme speed. Countless rocks, mixed with the red of the volcano and the scorching heat, fell down without distinguishing between friend and foe. However, these things that were enough to shatter the bones of ordinary people were casually swatted away by the people fighting, or simply blown away with a breath. A natural disaster that was like the end of the world couldn't cause any harm to these people at all. Perhaps it was because the natural disaster this time was actually caused by these people. Dong Wushong let out a long roar and leaped up. His dark saber once again turned into a thunderbolt and struck brazenly. Xiedan Qiong's Qianghua also struck, but this time it was simple. The power was concentrated, and the sea of flowers was no longer as bright as before. The three great guards didn't care about exhausting their own power. Every punch and every palm strike was launched with full force, with the power to destroy mountains. There was also Mo Lei who had concealed her tracks again, looking for an opportunity to strike at any time. Like a revolving lantern, they surrounded the saint and launched attacks with all their might. The difference in the cultivation of both sides was too great. At this time, only by using offense as a form of defense could they have a chance of victory, a chance of survival. The saint was in the center position. His sword was like the wind. Every sword was mixed with a biting cold sword aura, slashing open a space crack that didn't dissipate for a long time. At the same time, facing the overwhelming attacks of the great experts, he still seemed very relaxed. One side still had energy left. Jiyu Duxing, come up together. The saint's hoarse voice sneered. Let me see if your so-called brotherhood is better than absolute strength. Below, Jiyu Duxing closed his eyes, and his face was solemn. He was making use of all the time to regulate his breathing. The volcanic eruption just now was indeed very harmful, and it was almost indescribable with words. However, at the moment when the volcano really erupted, Jiyu Duxing could clearly feel that the power of the thick earth and the power of the earth that was spewed out at this moment was also dense to an indescribable extent. Chapter 2592. Jiyu Duxing closed his eyes and forced himself not to care about the battle situation. Although his brothers were in extreme danger, he didn't have the ability to make a move now. If he could seize the time to gather some earth power from here, he might be able to recover the strength to make a move. At that time, he wouldn't have to watch from the sidelines like he was now. He was just a burden. At this critical moment, countless pale green and dark red yuan qi surged towards Jiyu Duxing's body at a speed visible to the naked eye. Jiyu Duxing didn't reject any of these vital energy. Like rivers flowing into the sea, he absorbed the purest earth power from the volcano into his dantian. Jiyu Miaoling guarded beside Jiyu Duxing calmly, without any sadness or joy. Occasionally, when she saw a rock falling down, she would slap it away to maintain Jiyu Duxing's peace and stability. Jiyu Miaoling still had the ability to do such things. Since Jiyu Duxing didn't give up, how could she give up? She did her best and left the rest to fate. That was all. If my brothers die, I won't live either. Then I'll go with him. If everyone survives in the end, I'll spend the rest of my life with him. That was all. It wasn't a big deal. The battle in the sky became more and more intense. As everyone was injured, Dong Wushang, Xie Danqiong and Mo Leiye went berserk at the same time. At the same time, they fought with their lives on the line. In terms of moves and battle experience, the Holy Monarch had millions of years of accumulation. He might not be much stronger than the rest. But in terms of cultivation, both sides were no match at all. This was a gap that was difficult to make up for. Yet, this was the factor that could affect the battle situation the most. Individually, Dong Wushang made a move. He had used all of his essence, energy, and spirit to destroy the absolute killing aura of the sage. That move could be said to be an extremely crucial move. If Dong Wushang wasn't able to break through only me Saint Monarch's peerless aura, then everyone would be captured and killed in the next moment. And Dong Wushang's earth-shattering move was completely unleashed from the heart of the saber. If he didn't succeed, he would die for a righteous cause. If he didn't succeed, I'll go first. Even if it was the Holy Monarch, in the face of this blade that did not hesitate to die in exchange for the sake of subduing the enemy. The saber strike that gained the upper hand in a show of strength had actually taken away his will. Just as he was about to lose his willpower, the aura of control instantly weakened. Dong Wushang's decisive strike. He had succeeded in gaining the upper hand. Next, Xie Danqiong's viburnum flowers converged into a single point and suddenly bloomed resplendently, forcibly interrupting the sage's pursuit that was like a rainbow. This had shaken the sage's confidence for the second time. Although these two attacks didn't cause any damage to the sage's strength, the sage's aura had weakened. Then, it was Mo Leiye's all-out attack. Risking getting injured, she exchanged injury for injury and left another wound on the saint's body. Such an attack naturally wouldn't pose any threat to a saint. But it had truly created another scar. When the three of them attacked together, even if they were as strong as a saint, they wouldn't be able to withstand it. He would still be injured. However, this result also made the sage realize that if these people were to join hands, they would actually have the ability to threaten his life. As long as this thought arose, he would be even more cautious in his attacks. And this caution, to a certain extent, would weaken the sage's aura of certainty of victory by a lot. To make a more vulgar example, if a person was peeing and was suddenly choked halfway, what kind of feeling would that be? Although the other half could still be done. But ultimately, he would lose the feeling of being able to do it to his heart's content in one go. Therefore, at such a time, it was the time for everyone to attack together and attack from all sides. Even if they couldn't kill the enemy, they could extend the battle to the greatest extent. Based on the current situation, being able to continue the battle was already a great victory. Dong Wushang's roar was like thunder. His dark saber transformed into a rainbow and lightning, attacking with all his might like an erupting volcano. Xie Danqiong's viburnum flowers danced, as if they were inexhaustible and inexhaustible. Everything in the world is viburnum flowers in my hands. Mo Leiye's warm snow sword came and went without a trace. Gritting her teeth, she attacked from the east, the west, the left, the right, and thousands of afterimages at the same time. The three great guards also participated in the siege with all their might. However, there was a huge drawback to this kind of attack, which was that it would consume everyone's physical strength faster. Not long after, everyone already felt that their strength was not as strong as they wished. Although they could still barely hold on, it was impossible for them to last long. Only Saint, who was in a besieged state, was like a towering mountain that couldn't be shaken. No matter how hard everyone tried, it was like a mayfly trying to shake a tree. It was immovable and had no effect at all. The Saint's counterattack became slower and slower, but every attack was mixed with the tyrannical power of the laws of heaven and earth. Regardless of whether it was Dong Wushang's dark saber or Xie Danqiong's viburnum flowers, when faced with the laws of heaven and earth, they could only retreat in defeat. Everyone was besieging, and the attacks were endless, one after another, going back and forth. However, only Saint, who was at the center of the siege, had the real initiative. Everyone's attacks had already fallen into an endless cycle. As long as there was any loophole, the Saint would destroy them one by one, using a point to break the line, using a line to break the surface, completely annihilating them. The number one person in the world in a million years, this kind of strength was truly displayed today. Although he changed his appearance and refused to admit his identity, this kind of strength was still the number one in the world. At least in the entire Heaven Imperial Court, no one could compare to him. With a scream, a 7-star guard was kicked in the stomach by the Saint. In an instant, all his internal organs were shattered, and blood flowed out from all his orifices. He fell from the sky powerlessly. Persevere, aren't you brothers very close? The Saint's hands didn't stop, and he calmly faced the enemy. His hoarse voice mocked, one of your brothers has already gone down. Under this kick of mine, the chance of survival is very slim. Aren't you going to go down and care? What we do has nothing to do with you, bastard. A 7-star guard's face was filled with pain, and he gritted his teeth as he scolded. His subordinates were still attacking with all their might. Ian, is it really okay? Not necessarily. Let me be a good person and send you on your way to reunite with your brothers. The Saint's eyes flashed with murderous intent. His body turned, and in an instant, 5 identical figures appeared at the same time, attacking the 5 people at the same time. Since the first ring had been broken, a flaw had also appeared in the continuous attack. The Saint no longer had any scruples, and immediately launched a counterattack. Xie Danqiong and Dong Wushang shouted loudly, and their black saber and viburnum flower met a real longsword at the same time. They couldn't help but spit out blood. That 7-star guard's chest had already been hit by 37 palms in an instant. 37 palms were like mountain-splitting sledgehammers that pounded on his chest, and his entire chest collapsed in an instant. A swift and fierce sound of wind came, and a bloody hole appeared on the forehead of this 7-star guard. He didn't even have time to let out a scream of death. That 7-star guard glared at the Saint with resentful eyes, and finally floated down powerlessly. Another brother is gone. The Saint sneered. He was extremely sarcastic and cruel as he said, deep brotherly love? Ha ha ha. Deep brotherly love, can it withstand the boundary of life and death? Your love is so deep, can you save him? The eyes of the remaining 4 people turned red at the same time. They had traveled together for hundreds of thousands of miles, and they had interacted with each other day and night. Now, 2 people had died in succession right next to them. Below, Jiyu Miaoling's face was already full of tears. She caught the bodies of the 2 7-star guards, and placed them beside Jiyu Duxing so that they wouldn't be injured by the volcanic eruption. Bang, 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 bang. Explosions sounded in the air. Suddenly, a violent aura flourish. The remaining 7-star bodyguard shouted, Your Majesty. Suddenly, he rushed out like a madman. We've been together for 1,000,000 years. Now that my brother has gone one step ahead, why should I cherish this body? This 7-star guard emitted blazing flames from head to toe. He didn't care about the Saint's crazy punches and kicks falling on his body at the speed of a storm. He forcefully rushed forward, and actually hugged the Saint's waist with all his might. Saint Only Me clenched his teeth, and raised his hand to slap the guard's head. He sneered and said, Self-explosion? His entire head exploded like a watermelon, but that 7-star guard still sneered at the last moment of his life and said, It's the self-explosion of the soul. Saint, die. A mass of green gas rushed out from his exploded head, and turned into a small circle. Then, there was a loud boom. It suddenly exploded. The Saint shouted loudly, and spat out a mouthful of blood. He shouted, Even if it's the self-explosion of the soul, what can it do to me? He immediately flew back, but the 7-star bodyguard's body was still tightly hugging him. The moment he flew back, the 7-star bodyguard's body, which had already lost its life, suddenly exploded. This was the true self-explosion. This was the final fatal attack that had been premeditated for a long time. The self-explosion of the soul was aimed at the opponent's divine soul. That 7-star guard had long been prepared to die. He had integrated the majority of his cultivation into his body, and every strand of his flesh and blood in advance. The vibration of the soul explosion was the fuse that ignited this final explosion. Such a method could be said to be the most extreme method in the entire world. Even if the path was interrupted, or if there were no more enemies, this person still wouldn't be able to survive. The saint snorted, and soared into the sky like a meteor. He angrily said, "Scoundrel, you dare to use tricks." The clothes on his chest were completely torn apart, and a small breastplate that was flickering with holy light was exposed. This breastplate had gone through the huge explosion just now, and there were already a few holes in it. Blood was spurting out from these holes with a kai-kai sound. The saint gasped for breath. It was obvious that his injuries weren't light. The expression in his eyes was so violent that he was close to madness. His eyes were filled with a hysterical killing intent. He hated that he couldn't save this 7-star guard, and kill him 10,000 times. However, even if he was the saint, he still wouldn't be able to do this. Chapter 2593. In just a moment of contact, the 4 people who were in the middle of the battle suddenly suffered serious injuries at the same time. The only difference was that the saint was only injured and was not seriously injured. At least, his life was not in danger and he still had a lot of energy left to fight. However, Dong Wushang, Xie Danqiong and Mo Leiye had completely lost their ability to fight at this moment. Not only had they lost their ability to fight, the 3 of them were now at the point of exhaustion and were seriously injured to the point of death. What little life they had left was like a candle flickering in the wind, on the verge of collapse. Xie Danqiong, who was the first to be sent flying, fell into a coma. Dong Wushang and Mo Leiye only had a little bit of consciousness left, but they were powerless to stop their bodies from falling. They could only let nature take its course. Jiyu Miaoling flew over and caught Xie Danqiong first. Then, she lowered her body and flew into the air again, hugging Mo Leiye with one hand. Finally, she used her shoulder to carry Dong Wushang and landed with a whoosh. Although her cultivation was only at the level of a celestial being, it was not difficult for her to do all this. If she was still in the heavenly layer, her cultivation would have long surpassed the 2 strongest people in the heavenly layer, Moonbreeze. It was a pity that this was the heaven's imperial court. Jiyu Miaoling could only do this now. At this moment, Jiyu Duxing's surroundings had completely turned into a sea of red. Countless red yuan qi endlessly drilled into his body. The situation of the volcano eruption was now nearing its end. The battle just now had caused the earth to tremble continuously. It had finally affected. Jiyu Miaoling flew back with the 3 people in her arms. Just as she landed beside Jiyu Duxing, she heard a whoosh sound behind her. A hoarse voice said, "Miss, why do you still have to make such a futile struggle? The death of these 3 people has long been decided, just let them go." It was the voice of the saint Only Me. This voice was full of fatigue, but there was also an almost unconcealable feeling of relief. Everything was finally settled. These 4 young geniuses who could pose a threat to me will finally fall in my hands today. From now on, I can rest easy. Jiyu Miaoling's body trembled, but she did not turn back. She did not even reply. She still followed her original plan and gently put the 3 people down. Xie Danqiong and Dong Wushang were placed beside Jiyu Duxing. But Mo Leiye let her lean on Dong Wushang. Only then did he raise his head and stare at the person who had just arrived. He said softly, "Are you very pleased with yourself now?" The sage felt somewhat flabbergasted as he saw the woman in front of him being so calm, and said, complacent, "Not necessarily. However, I still won in the end. Ha ha ha." Jiyu Miaoling faintly smiled and said, "There used to be a rogue in our hometown. He was very tall, courageous, and powerful. He was insufferably arrogant. Perhaps it was because he was really tall and unreasonable, so the villagers were all afraid of him. One day, he indiscriminately bullied a group of foreign children. The foreign children fought with him and actually beat the hooligan black and blue. But the hooligan finally defeated the group of children. The hooligan was very proud at that time and said, 'I won in the end.' She tilted her head and said, 'Your Majesty, I don't know why, But I suddenly thought of that hooligan from back then. He actually said the same words to you, but it was so despicable, so despicable. This really isn't disrespect to you, it's just a moment of lament. The sage's complexion finally changed. It's not disrespect to me. With my status and cultivation, if I were to fight with these youngsters, wouldn't it be the same as that hooligan bullying a group of children? If this isn't scolding me, then what is? This is the most vicious sarcasm. She scolded the sage of Tianqiu, the #1 person in the heavenly imperial court in a million years, the supreme ruler, into a despicable and despicable hooligan. On the other side, Dong Wushang and Mo Lei, whose bones and tendons were about to break, were still conscious. Although they could no longer move and were in so much pain, after hearing Jiyu Miaoling's words, they still couldn't help but laugh. As they laughed, they vomited blood, but they were full of joy. Mo Lei choked and said, "Sister Miaoling, I've known you for so long, but I really didn't know that you could be so good with words." Jiyu Miaoling pretended to be angry and said, "What Miaoling Street, you should call me sister-in-law." Mo Lei hurriedly begged for mercy. "I'm wrong. Ha ha ha. Sister-in-law, second sister-in-law." Cloud Master's gaze turned cold, and he said in a low voice, "I'll say it again, I'm not the sage. You keep linking me with the sage. Are you trying to blame your deaths on the sage? You don't have that right." Jiyu Miaoling smiled slightly. "Is that so? So you're really not the sage?" The sage's complexion changed. "Of course not." Jiyu Miaoling said calmly, "Then you're definitely more powerful than the sage." Cloud Master was stunned when he heard this, and he subconsciously asked, "What do you mean?" Jiyu Miaoling smiled and said softly, "My cultivation is shallow, and I shouldn't have made such a judgment, but that day when my husband fought with the Western Sky's heavenly emperor Wu Yequang, I was also present. The sage took advantage of my husband's battle with the heavenly emperor maniac sword to launch a sneak attack on my husband, causing my husband to finally lose. And the weapon that he used to launch a sneak attack on my husband really left a deep impression on me. It seems to be the sword that you used to receive fourth brother Wu Shong just now." She sneered lightly. "Since you're not the sage, and you have that sword, you must have seized it from the sage's hands. Aren't you still stronger than the sage? The sage's sword has already been seized. What a pitiful child. Presumably, the two words sage, in your eyes, is not even worth a fart, right?" Jiyu Miaoling smiled and looked at the sage, saying indifferently, "Don't you think so?" The sage's facial muscles twitched, and he forced himself to be calm, pretending to be indifferent as he said, "The words of a woman, speaking without thinking, and showing off in vain. Even if it's a deluge of heavenly flowers, it's still nothing but a corpse in the end. If I were you, I would absolutely not speak like this, because, even if it's a quick death, it's still better than being unable to live and unable to die." His eyes held a heavy threat. "You're all women, so you should also know that there are many ways in this world to make a woman unable to live and unable to die." Jiyu Miaoling laughed mockingly. "I know, and I admit that there are many such ways. However, women are different from each other. The reason why a woman is unable to live and unable to die is fundamentally because she doesn't want to die. That's all. Even if she dies, she can still be shamed for 10,000 years." The sage said indifferently, "A person dying is like an extinguished lamp. So what if she's shamed for 10,000 years?" Jiyu Miaoling said upright and unafraid, "I don't live for the sake of the people of the world. The pity, sorrow, anger, cursing, and disdain of the people of the world have nothing to do with me." She suddenly turned her head and looked at the sage. "Actually, out of kindness, I think it's necessary for me to remind your majesty of a matter." You're not your majesty, and it was a slip of the tongue. You still care too much about other people's opinions. This is not a good thing. As a person, if you can be more normal, it's a good thing for both yourself and others." Jiyu Miaoling's words were especially sincere and meaningful. Dong Wushang and Mo Lei laughed until their stomachs hurt. Even Xie Danqiong, who had just woken up and was still weak, also laughed loudly. The sage was so angry that his nose was crooked. This sentence seemed to be well-intentioned, but how old was he? How could he be lectured by a girl from an opposing side? No, it was a lesson. It was a lesson from beginning to end. Bit. You're courting death. The sage was finally enraged, and his murderous intent surged in an instant. Especially when he saw that the three opponents, who were all injured by his hands and made him look battered and exhausted, could still laugh so happily even though their bodies were weak. He couldn't help but feel an inexplicable anger that was difficult to suppress. If I had such a brother, why would I be here alone today? At this moment, a cold voice said, I'm still alive, and I'm right here. Who dares to say that my wife is courting death? Xie Danqiong and Dong Wushang were overjoyed. Second brother, Jiyu Duxing slowly stood up, the black dragon sword held horizontally in his hand, like a pool of autumn water, brilliant and clear. His eyes stared coldly at the sage, and there was no hatred or disgust. Your eyes are very calm. The sage said indifferently, it seems that not only is the hatred of tens of thousands of soldiers dying in my hands not in your heart, you don't even care that these brothers of yours are about to die because of you. You actually don't hate me at all. You're so heartless, it really makes me feel bitterly disappointed. I really feel sorry for those loyal and brave soldiers who died. His face was full of compassion, as if he was preaching the truth and enforcing justice on behalf of the heavens. Jiyu Duxing smiled indifferently. You call yourself me? You're finally willing to admit your identity. But you're right. I really don't hate you. Because my hatred, disgust, and disdain are all built on a foundation, a basic foundation. Otherwise, those comrades of mine who died in battle, and these brothers in front of me, would probably blame me instead. This foundation is, that the other party must at least be a human. He smiled coldly, and his icy gaze stared intently at the sage. He said with a smile, but can you, Cloud Master, still be considered a human? What qualifications do you have to bear my hatred? The sage was stunned. At the side, Dong Wushang and Xie Danqiong cheered loudly. Second brother said it well, you've won my heart. Cloud Master, how can you be considered a human? You actually tried in vain to consider the problem from the perspective of a human. Ha ha ha. What a joke. How delightful. Like I said, second brother Jiyu usually doesn't scold people, but once he does, he'll be so angry that he'll jump out of his coffin. Ha ha ha, but the sage didn't laugh. He looked at Jiyu Duxing and said indifferently, Jiyu Duxing is indeed Jiyu Duxing. At such a time when you're at the end of your rope, you can actually say such things to me. I can't help but admire you. Chapter 2594. Jiyu Duxing said coldly, aren't you thinking too highly of yourself with these words? In other people's eyes, you might be the most powerful person in the world, but, in my eyes, you're really nothing. At least, you shouldn't add the word person. Aren't you proud that I'm saying this to you? You're proud of me? Anger rose in the saint's heart. He was about to say something when his gaze suddenly froze. He made a soft sound of surprise. Because, at this moment, he suddenly realized that Jiyu Duxing's aura was actually no longer the aura he had seen before. The previous Jiyu Duxing was sharp and straight, and he would rather break than bend. His entire person was like an unsheathed divine sword, showing off its edge. But now, at this moment, although that aura was still there, it was more stable, more dignified, and more solid. There was even a faint sense of elegance. This made him feel even more that Jiyu Duxing's foundation was actually as deep as the sea and as vast as the mountains. Jiyu Duxing, I didn't expect you to have a new understanding during this period of time when you were injured. When the saint asked this question, not only did his killing intent rise crazily, it was also accompanied by extreme madness. What kind of opportunity, and what kind of understanding, could change the aura of a peak expert like Jiyu Duxing who had long been molded like this? How many people had never had such an understanding even once in their lives? And Jiyu Duxing actually had such an understanding when he was at the end of the road. To him, it was actually so simple. Jiyu Duxing smiled. Are you very jealous? The saint nodded slowly, his killing intent rising. It's a pity. Your epiphany should have been interrupted by your brothers, Jiyu Duxing. You, who have yet to recover from your serious injuries, must die today. You must remember that you were killed by your brothers. Until this moment, the saint still didn't forget to attack the brotherhood of everyone present. It was obvious how vicious his schemes were. But from another perspective, it also declared the lamentable nature of this person, Cloud Lord, as a person. Gu Duxing slowly drew his sword. He said indifferently, "It doesn't matter." This was really super indifferent. Xie Danqiong and Dong Wushang cheered loudly. They struggled and said, "Second brother Gu, the three of us brothers will die here today. This is really our fate. We didn't ask to be born in the same day, but to die in the same day. If there is an afterlife, let's be brothers again." Dong Wushang shouted loudly. "That's right. If there's a next life, let's be brothers again." Gu Duxing's voice was filled with deep emotions. "I remember back then, I once told Big Brother, if a brother needs to step on me to climb up a mountain of blades, then I'll let him step on me. Even if he steps on me, he can only take one step forward." Xie Danqiong and Dong Wushang laughed at the same time. "That's right. Even if it's just one step forward. Because, with my brothers by my side, I am invincible." Gu Duxing looked up to the sky and let out a long howl. He, who had always been cold and sharp, was at this moment. However, he displayed extreme arrogance as he pointed his sword. He shouted, "Master Yun, remove your disguise and reveal your mountain and river sword. Come, 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 fight me." The sage clenched his teeth and said indifferently, "Since things have come to this, I will fulfill the last wish of a dying person like you." As he spoke, his body swayed and his bloated body suddenly disappeared. Instead, it was replaced by a thin Lord Saint Monarch wearing a plain robe. He stood there like a deep abyss, awe-inspiring and inviolable. Although there were bloodstains on his chest and his face was a little pale, it didn't detract from the sage's aura of a sovereign descending to the world. Gu Duxing nodded indifferently. Not bad at all. Although you only revealed your true identity when you felt that you had absolute confidence, I still feel a little happy. By the way, beating up that bloated masked fatty just now is far less satisfying than beating up the Tianqiu Saint Monarch, as well as the pleasure. Dong Wushang and Xie Danqiong were about to cry from laughter. They didn't expect Gu Duxing to be so good at this. He let the sage return to his original appearance so that he could have a sense of accomplishment and pleasure. The sage snorted heavily and turned to Xie Danqiong and Dong Wushang. He said, "The two of you are after all already celestial emperors of a generation and should be protected by the laws of heaven and earth. It's not good for me to kill you. How about this? I'll give you a chance. As long as you scold Gu Duxing, any scolding will do, I'll let the three of you go. Today, I'll only take Gu Duxing's life. I'll even spare his wife's life. This condition can be considered generous, right?" His face was full of righteousness, as if he was making a promise. He vowed solemnly, "For such a small request, you should know how big of a compromise I've already made. You have 2 worlds on your shoulders, millions of people. How much responsibility do you have? There's also the extraterrestrial demons. How can you throw your lives away here? Great Emperor Wushang, Great Emperor Jasper Flower, why don't you carefully?" His words were extravagant, using the most sincere words and an expectant expression. He even added the cultivation of elemental energy that could charm one's mind. The sage asked himself in his heart, such a small price can be exchanged for a chance to live. Not only can it save oneself, but it can also save others. If it were me, I definitely wouldn't let go of such a chance to save myself, save others, and have no future troubles. I don't believe that you're really not tempted. Even if you're not tempted, would Gu Duxing not be? He can save your lives and his wife's lives. Whether you scold Gu Duxing or Gu Duxing asks you to agree, the so-called unbreakable brotherhood between the two of you will have an additional crack. And what I want is precisely this crack. In this world, there's no such thing as an unbreakable bond. You people are just cowards who are afraid of death in your bones. You just don't show it. Once you say it, I'll immediately kill all of you. And a huge shadow in my heart will be removed. In the end, there's no such thing as an unbreakable bond in the world. But before he could finish, He was interrupted by Dong Wushang. "Shut that bird mouth of yours, that's full of shit." Dong Wushang spat disdainfully. "Why are you so disgusting? I'd rather believe that women don't get jealous. I'll definitely not believe the lousy promises that come out of your lousy mouth. If you want to kill, just kill. What's the point of saying so much? Do you really think that everyone likes the nonsense you say?" Xie Danqiong sneered. "Ignore him. This bastard is envious, jealous, and hateful. He only knows how to be pretentious like an idiot, but he insists on treating everyone in the world as idiots. He thinks that he's the only smart person in the world. Talking to him is simply a waste of saliva. Second brother Ji, fight with him, cripple him, kill him. We brothers will accompany you. If we live, we'll die together. If we die, we'll die together." The two of them roared at the same time. "Good." Ji Duxing roared to the sky. "Well said. We're brothers. If we live, we'll die together. If we die, we'll die together. Good brothers." The black dragon sword current overflowed with an extreme thirst for blood. The sword light flashed. The clanging of the sword. The saint's face gradually darkened. "Since I've given you a way out, don't blame me for being heartless. Let's die together." His body suddenly leaped up. He grabbed at Ji Duxing. Although Ji Duxing's injuries had improved greatly now, he only had the strength for one attack at most. This point, everyone present could see it. He didn't even need to use too much strength to defeat him. Defeat. Kill. But the saint obviously didn't want to kill Ji Duxing directly. "Since you're brothers, don't blame me for cruelly killing you one by one in front of your own brothers. Brothers in life and death. Ha ha ha." The saint's face suddenly became extremely ferocious. "I'll let your brothers in front of you copulate with your women. I'd like to see how you'll resist this human instinct. After you've each other's women. Whether you can still be brothers after death. Ha ha ha." His ferocious laughter exuded extreme evilness and lust. At this moment, the expressions of Ji Duxing and the others finally change. Ji Miaoling and Mo Leiya looked at each other and said sadly, "We'll take our leave first." After saying that, they were about to commit suicide to remove the last scruples of the three brothers. "If you live, you scoundrels, if you die, you'll naturally die. Even if your corpses are gone, it doesn't matter. Regardless of life and death, I'll make it difficult for you to protect your chastity. Even if all your women die, it doesn't matter. I can arrange the corpses of your brothers together. Since your brotherhood is so deep that you won't abandon each other in life and death, then let's go one step further. Ji Duxing, you still have the power for one last attack. What are you waiting for? Make your move. After you make your move, it'll be my turn to perform. Perform to your heart's content." The saint completely didn't have the demeanor of a peerless expert at this moment. This kind of extreme evilness that had already reached hysteria came out of his mouth just like that. Ji Duxing and the others revealed sorrow in their eyes. To meet such a completely shameless lunatic, what other way was there? The only choice was to self-destruct. Only by destroying their physical bodies could they avoid this level of humiliation. But Dong Wushang and the other two might not even be able to commit suicide at this moment. To self-destruct was easier said than done. The only chance was for Ji Duxing to use the power of his final attack on the five of them. The power of his final attack was actually going to be used here. But at this moment, wind and thunder surged in the sky. An extremely grand and abundant sword light came crashing down like a thunderbolt. A cold voice said, "Master Yun, it turns out that the saint of your generation is actually so shameless. You are indeed the number one in the imperial court. Indeed, no one can stand shoulder to shoulder with you. It's just that if you want to bully my brothers, have you asked for my permission?" At this moment, when they suddenly heard this voice that they hadn't heard for a long time, whether it was a strong man like Dong Wushang, or the always cold and emotionless Ji Duxing, or even Xie Danqiong, who was already a celestial emperor of a generation, all of them suddenly burst into tears at the same time. "Boss, I'm very disappointed. My dream of being the main character is finally shattered." The people from the film company said, "From the photos, You are still a little suitable for the role of Tan Tan. But, now that I see you in person, I realize that you have the most future in writing books. You will definitely be able to achieve meteoric success and definitely become famous." These words made me burst with joy. I immediately decided to only write books and not do anything else. After drinking, I returned to the hotel to lie down and think about things. Only then did I slowly understand. Damn it, aren't they mocking me? Now, in Peony River, when a Jen and Sharpknife heard about this, they laughed like crazy on the spot. Regarding the film industry, if there are any developments in the future, I will immediately report to everyone. Chapter 2595. The three of them didn't expect that at such a critical moment, their boss Chu Yang would suddenly appear in front of them like a heavenly soldier descending from the heavens. At this moment, they were so excited that they felt like their hearts were about to explode. At the same time, an unprecedented sense of security arose spontaneously. "Boss is here, no one can hurt us anymore." The sage slowly turned around, only to see a handsome youth standing in front of him. He was travel-worn and weary. Although it was difficult to conceal the exhaustion on his face, his gaze was still as sharp as a sword. It was awe-inspiring. The man looked at Jiyu Duxing and the others with eyes full of comfort and sorrow. But then, he looked at Saint Sage with eyes full of anger, disdain, and contempt. He also had a sword in his hand. And what surprised Saint Sage even more was, at this moment, the sword aura, murderous intent, and battle intent were even stronger than Jiyu Duxing. Much stronger. Saint Sage took a deep breath and said cautiously, "You are their boss." This was Saint Sage's first time seeing Chu Yang in person, and also Chu Yang's first time coming into direct contact with Saint Sage. When he heard Jiyu Duxing and the others call out boss at the same time, Saint Sage was so regretful that his intestines turned green. He didn't expect that help would come so quickly. He didn't expect that it would be their boss who came. He didn't expect that they would face each other head-on like a decisive battle here. If he had known this earlier, he would have set up an ambush nearby with experts from Saint Emperor Palace. Not to mention just one boss, even if there were a few more. What did it matter? But now, there was a subtle change in the situation. At the very least, his identity had been exposed. Jiyu Duxing, that bastard, had just lied to him to restore his original appearance, and this guy's boss had actually arrived so coincidentally. What was even more unfortunate was that he was injured at this time. What was even more unfortunate was that the 10 doppelgangers he had used to guard against accidents had all been used up. And there was also, was this boss the only one who came to help, or was there someone else? For example, if it was Donghuang Shui Leihan, or if it was Demon Empress Yarrow Xin. If either of these two people came, today's situation would definitely be difficult to resolve. Although it was the first time they met, Saint Sage was very surprised to discover that Chu Yang's strength was not only above Jiyu Duxing and Dong Wushang's, it was even much stronger. Now, he actually didn't have a 100% chance of victory. Opposite. Chu Yang smiled coldly. "Of course, I'm their boss. Moreover, it was I who led people to destroy your Saint Emperor Palace. Or was it me who annihilated one of your myriad saints' true spirit bases and one of your avatars? That's right, the one who killed your wife's clone was also me. Now it's me. I'm going to kill you right here." The sage laughed heartily. "Arrogant junior, you're spouting nonsense." Chu Yang said calmly, "Is he really arrogant? I swore in my heart when you tried to deal with my brother so viciously. In this life, you and I are irreconcilable. In this life, I will definitely regard you as my greatest enemy. In this life, you will die by my sword. No one can hurt my brothers. And, no one can threaten my brothers," Chu Yang solemnly said, "especially you. Cloud Master is even more unworthy." The sage's pupils contracted. At this moment, he suddenly felt a chill run down his spine. He could clearly feel the seriousness of Chu Yang's word. Every word he said was spoken with his heart. And, these words were equivalent to Chu Yang's oath. An oath that he would never regret in his life. Sure enough, in the next moment, The sky that was filled with volcanic clouds suddenly exploded with a thunderclap. In an instant, it was as bright as day. The thick smoke instantly disappeared without a trace, and the horizon was once again clear and blue. There were no clouds in the sky for thousands of miles, but a majestic voice shouted, "Oath granted." Then, there was a crisp clang. It was as if a small bell had been struck. It was exceptionally crisp and clear. But at this moment, this clang reverberated in the hearts of all living beings in the entire Heaven Imperial Court, and even in the Heaven Continent and various small plane. Regardless of whether they were humans, birds, beasts, martial artists, or ordinary people, they all heard the sound of the bell and were shaken at the same time. The sage also felt as if there was a bell in his heart that had been fiercely rung. His expression changed greatly. This was an oath to the heavenly Tao. He knew that Chu Yang had just spoken with the tone of an oath, but he had never thought that Chu Yang's oath would be able to trigger the heavenly law to bear witness, launching the supreme oath to the heavenly law. Once this oath came out, there was no longer any room to change it. Between Chu Yang and Master Yun, one must die. Either one or the other, there was no exception. Even if it was the highest existence in this world, they would also be unable to change this oath. Actually, to say that Chu Yang was able to arrive in time, there was also an element of luck. Chu Yang galloped all the way and finally arrived at the Big Western Paradise. But arriving at the Big Western Paradise didn't mean that he could immediately find Dong Wushang and company. It must be known that Dong Wushang and company used the Black Dragon Sword as a guide to search for Jiyu Duxing's whereabouts. This matter was carried out in absolute secrecy, and no one knew. Therefore, Chu Yang's side was completely at a loss about their whereabouts. On the contrary, the sage, who had long since set up a trap, followed them all the way and launched an attack at the right time. Chu Yang clearly knew that Dong Wushang and company might be in life-threatening danger, but he only remembered this point when he arrived. The only one who had the ability to use Shen techniques to find them, Mo Tianji, had also suffered a backlash because he had previously used the future Heavenly Eye technique. In the short term, it was absolutely impossible for him to use another technique again. And the guidance of the Calamity Sword was also only an approximate direction. It couldn't possibly be that precise. Chu Yang had no other choice but to wander around aimlessly. But he happened to find a jade-green light in the distance. And a surge of fighting spirit burst out from it. Chu Yang's eyes widened in shock. Then, he looked at the jade-green light. This made Chu Yang almost cry out in pleasant surprise. That vigorous aura, that overbearing air, completely matched Dong Wushang. This made Chu Yang immediately conclude that this was Dong Wushang's move. And at that time, Chu Yang was still at least 1,500 kilometers away from the location of the battle. Seeing the sudden change here, and even more clearly feeling Dong Wushang's violent aura, Chu Yang naturally rushed over with all his might without hesitation. By the time the surrounding volcanoes erupted, Chu Yang's galloping purple clouds were already close to the range of 500 kilometers. Fortunately, the heavens blessed the good. The saint had set his mind on destroying the friendship between Jiyu Duxing, Dong Wushang, and Xie Danqiong. He used all kinds of methods to achieve his despicable goal, which delayed him for a while, allowing Chu Yang to catch up at the last moment. If the saint had still acted according to his original intention and killed without a second word, the 5 people who were lucky enough to survive would all have been hard-pressed to escape. Even if Chu Yang finally arrived, he would only see 5 corpses at most. It was just that although Chu Yang had arrived in time at the last moment, the battle situation was still not optimistic. First of all, the saint's own strength was still stronger than Chu Yang's. Although the saint was injured under the joint attack of Dong Wushang and the other 2, his injuries weren't too serious. His combat power was still abundant, and he definitely had the strength to fight. And more importantly, Chu Yang's current state was very, 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 very bad. The current Chu Yang was cold on the outside, and his gaze was cold. He didn't show the slightest bit of inferiority, but on the inside, his insides were already burning, and his situation was dire. Previously, when Mo Tianji had issued a warning, Chu Yang had rushed to the big western sky in one breath, trekking 8,000 kilometers the whole way. Moreover, He had used his own martial power to activate the Calamity Sword, and had become one with the sword. The degree of exhaustion and extreme consumption of energy along the way could be imagined. He almost couldn't control his vision from turning black, and almost fell down. However, Chu Yang looked all around, and examined the scene in front of him. He couldn't help but almost lose his breath, which immediately turned into a towering rage. Monstrous murderous intent subsequently raged, and he almost said those words without thinking. And after saying it, he unexpectedly obtained the witness of the heavenly law oath. This result made Chu Yang stunned. This heavenly law oath seemed to have come at a very bad time. Regardless of whether there was an oath or not, Chu Yang and the other brothers would have sworn to fight the saint to the death, and with this oath, each side's position was even more obvious, and everything was put on the table. However, the appearance of this heavenly law oath at this time was tantamount to forcing Chu Yang and the saint to launch a decisive battle today. However, the current situation was that Chu Yang's body was in an extremely bad situation, and Mo Tianji was suffering from the backlash of heaven's will, and couldn't make a move. More than half of the brothers here were injured soldiers. This battle was really too difficult to fight. At the same time, Demon Imperial Palace. The Demon Empress, who was in the middle of operating her internal energy to repair her body, was suddenly startled. What's this situation? What's going on? Whose oath actually obtained the witness of the heavenly law oath? This. At the side, Donghuang Shuelehan, who was dressed in snow-white clothes from the Eastern Royal Heaven, also frowned in surprise. This change is really unexpected. The heavenly law oath has always only appeared in legends. In real life, at least in these millions of years, it has never appeared before. Who in the world actually has this kind of great fortune, and has triggered this kind of opportunity? After the news that the Demon Empress was injured for some reason and was besieged by many experts spread out, Donghuang Shuelehan rushed to the Demon Emperor Heaven immediately. The great heavenly demon war was imminent, and the Demon Empress, as the main battle force, couldn't be lost. Therefore, Donghuang took the initiative to help the Demon Empress heal her. At this time, it was already the 5th day since Shuelehan arrived here. And the Demon Empress healing process had finally come to an end. Other than her body, which had yet to fully recover, everything else was back to normal. The injury this time was really no small matter. And just at this time, the warning bell of the heavenly law oath suddenly sounded. It made the two of them realize at the same time. Their expressions changed greatly. When I return home tomorrow, I will immediately explode. Chapter 2596. I reckon, other than those little fellows, no one else might be able to cause such a situation. The Demon Empress pondered for a moment before she smiled and said, "Actually, what I'm really puzzled about is the other party. This sort of oath to the heavenly Tao that gathered all the will energy and boundless resentment is something that can't be done unless there's absolutely irreconcilable hatred. But, with the current strength and influence of those little fellows, who could cause them to feel hatred that's difficult to erase? I think that something rather tragic must have happened in the past few days." Shuelehan's face immediately showed some worry. He murmured, "Indeed, but if something more painful happened, what exactly would it be?" The Demon Empress said softly, "No matter what it is, if we go over now, it's destined to be too late." Shuelehan nodded slightly. After thinking for a while, he smiled and said, "Those 14 or 15 of them have the same life and death. Now, each of them has achieved their own strength. If we want to annihilate all of them, I'm afraid, even if Shangren Yun takes action personally, together with all the combat power of the Holy Emperor Palace, we may not be able to do it." This sentence caused the Demon Empress to be shocked. They have a total of 14 or 15 people. Why are there so many? Where did 14 or 15 people come from? The Demon Empress was inexplicably shocked. Isn't it just Chu Yang, Dong Wushang, Jimo, Luo Kedi, Xiedanqiong, Rui Butong, these people? Are there others? How come I didn't know at all? Although the Demon Empress knew Zi Xieching, Mo Qingwu, Mo Tianji, Chu Lo and the others, and was even quite familiar with them, these people had never fought in front of her and displayed their strength, so she didn't know that these people were actually all the top experts in the world. At this moment, Shui Leihan smiled with some complacency and pride. He said, "Now that things have come to this, I won't hide it from you anymore. But there are indeed 15 people. There's absolutely no deviation in this. Who are they? Tell me." The Demon Empress sat up straight, her expression extremely serious. "The real experts you know include Great Emperor Dong Wushang, Great Emperor Xie Danqiong, Great Emperor Ao Xieyun, Great Emperor Duxing. These 4 new celestial emperors can be compared to us. But there's another thing I'm sure you don't know. These 4 people recognized one person who was above them. In their world, he was known as the Minister. And this person is Chu Yang, the one who killed Yuan Tianzhenju when he was very weak. Chu Yang is their common boss, the publicly acknowledged boss." Shui Leihan's words directly shook the Demon Empress to the core. It wasn't that she didn't know about Chu Yang's high status. She also knew that everyone respected him very much. However, in her eyes, or rather, in the eyes of everyone in the Heaven Layer Imperial Court, Chu Yang had yet to achieve that kind of achievement. However, Dong Wushang and Xie Danqiong had already become heavenly emperors. This was incomparable. People with high statuses, people who were worthy of respect, might not necessarily have powerful strength. Perhaps Chu Yang was such a person. But, never in their wildest dreams would they have thought that Chu Yang was actually the publicly recognized leader of these people. Stronger than these people. Those 15 people, as well as the Phoenix Emperor Rui Butong, the Wolf Luo Ku Di, the Solitude Emperor Jimo. Although these people had this title long ago in the world where they rose to power, they have yet to truly ascend to the position of Heavenly Emperor, so they can't be considered worthy of their title. However, they might not be inferior to Zui Wuqing and Wu Yequang. Shui Leihan said, "Also, I'm sure you don't know even more. Outside the many forces in the Heaven Layer Imperial Court, there's a hidden figure. In a sense, he's the one who really controls the entire Heaven Layer Imperial Court. Perhaps, he's the biggest surprise. Controls the entire Heaven Layer Imperial Court?" The Demon Empress' eyes widened. "Who? On what basis?" Shui Leihan said lightly, "On what basis? Do you know the current Heaven Layer Imperial Court? The only one who has tentacles all over the intelligence network of the entire Heaven Layer Imperial Court, the most mysterious leader of the Tianji Intelligence Department, is the one who has never shown his true strength among the brothers, Mo Tianji." The beautiful face of the Demon Empress twitched. She even looked a little sluggish. Shui Leihan's evaluation of Mo Tianji wasn't exaggerated at all. The leader of the intelligence network of the entire Heaven Layer Imperial Court could be said to control the entire Heaven Layer Imperial Court. It wasn't an exaggeration at all. It was just that she didn't expect that the bunch of little guys she spoke of had actually grown to such a level. When such strength was really combined, it wasn't just shocking to the world. They could practically re-establish the order of the Heaven Layer Imperial Court. "And," Shui Leihan said, "and, other than these people, there's actually someone at the level of Heavenly Emperor?" The Demon Empress was really shocked today, but she asked as if she was angry. "You still don't believe me? There really are some who are at the level of Heavenly Emperor. Chu Yang has 8 sworn brothers in total. And there's another one besides these sworn brothers who isn't among Chu Yang's sworn brothers, Tan Tan. This person is Chu Yang's junior brother. He's both righteous and evil, but they treat each other with sincerity. His achievements are definitely not below these few people." Shui Leihan said, "In fact, he's even better than them." The Demon Empress' mouth really started to twitch. "That ugly guy who knew Ninga the earliest. That's right. That's him. Speaking of which, I still really admire His Highness Ning Tai. He and Tan Tan knew each other when they were young, and he was willing to call himself his junior brother. This insight is really not something that ordinary people can compare to. At least, I admit that I can't do it." When Shui Leihan heard the Demon Empress comment, he couldn't help but laugh. Instead, he praised Demon Ning Tai and said, "With Tan Tan's current achievements, I'm afraid he's only one step away from you and me. Moreover, it's said that this ugly guy once fought the joint forces of 4 great experts, including the flaming sun Heavenly Emperor Long Inghuan, alone some time ago. In the end, both sides suffered great losses, and that Tan Tan still managed to escape calmly. The Demon Empress was completely speechless. That guy called Tan Tan has already grown to such a level? It's really unbelievable. Well, I'm not surprised that his Chu Yang's junior brother. That little guy has always been bossy to Ning, but is so respectful to Chu Yang. So there's this relationship. Shui Leihan nodded. That's right. Actually, Demon Empress, don't be fooled by his looks, but he's quite lucky with women. His wife is the only sister of the Jade Flower Emperor. Oh my god, the Demon Empress held her forehead and groaned. He must be really lucky to be able to marry a wife with that kind of character. Moreover, she was the only sister of the heavenly monarch of the Black Cloud Heaven Palace. The Jade Flower Monarch was quite an outstanding person, so his sister should not be too bad either. Why did she marry that ugly bastard? All the good cabbages were given to him. What a waste. Other than these forces that I mentioned just now, there are a few people among them whose strength is not below theirs. Shui Leihan seriously demonstrated what it meant to not stop until his words shocked people to death. There are a few people. The Demon Empress didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Shui Leihan, don't beat around the bush anymore. Just say it all at once. Okay, there are a few more people. You've seen one of them before, Mo Lei, the wife of the Heavenly Emperor Wu Shong. You should know her strength very well, so I won't waste my breath. Shui Leihan said. The Demon Empress nodded. Yes, Mo Lei's aptitude is the best I've ever seen. Her future achievements will not be below Dong Wushang's. Best aptitude? Shui Leihan pursed his lips very discreetly. Also, that little girl, Mo Qingwu, who is usually dressed in red, is Mo Tianji's younger sister. Her achievements are on par with these people. In fact, she is even slightly better than some of them. Shui Leihan's voice was indifferent. But the Demon Empress was already a little impatient. Slightly better than others? Do you know how high you've already praised those people just now? You actually said that she's slightly better than them? How can that be? Also, the little girl in white, Chu Le, her cultivation achievements are about the same as Mo Qingwu's. Moreover, Chu Le is Chu Yang's sister and Mo Tianji's sweetheart. She has the inheritance of the heavenly poison and supreme poison techniques. Moreover, her poison techniques have already far surpassed the heavenly poison sect that shocked the world back then. Shui Leihan narrowed his eyes. Already surpassed the heavenly poison sect. Poison techniques. The Demon Empress muttered to herself. Don't be so surprised yet. What's more surprising is yet to come. Mo Qingwu has the innate spirit physique and the spirit gathering physique, while Chu Le has the innate poison physique and the free and natural physique. Shui Leihan's words were obviously taking revenge on the Demon Empress for saying that Mo Lei's children have the best physique. His Shui Leihan's scheme had obviously succeeded. The Demon Empress was so shocked that she was speechless. Also, Chu Yang's other wife, Wu Qianqian. Although her current cultivation has not reached the peak, she has the conversion mystical yin physique. What's more, the conversion mystical yin martial arts that she practices are of the highest quality. With time, her achievements are destined to be brilliant. Shui Leihan said solemnly, you should know what this conversion mystical yin physique means. The Demon Empress said bitterly, how can I not know? I know too well. I myself have the conversion mystical yin physique. Oh, that's really such a coincidence. But do you know that not only does Wu Qianqian have the conversion mystical yin physique, she has the innate conversion mystical yin physique? Shui Leihan rolled his eyes. Because the place where she was born was coincidentally on top of a mystical yin earth vein, so you are still somewhat different from her. Cough, cough, cough. The Demon Empress coughed violently and glared at Shui Leihan furiously. Shui Leihan, you bastard. Aren't you saying that I'm destined to be inferior to that girl in the future? That girl will definitely surpass this empress one day? Warmly recommending our good friend, Master Yueguan's new book in the history category, Night Sky. Just by looking at the title of this book, I feel as if I'm looking at a peerless overlord who controls the world in the dark. I believe from the bottom of my heart that this book will definitely not disappoint us. I've already collected it. Everyone should collect it too. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.